Good morning, everyone. I would like to call the Subcommittee on Federal Impacts on Minnesotans and Economic Stability to order. Members, I'd like to start today by adopting into the public record the nonpartisan summary of our first hearing on SNAP. You'll find that document at the top of your committee packets, and we'll start getting a nonpartisan summary for each of the 2-week blocks that we get. This will be able to be found online for press and members of the public so that you can see the summary of the work that we're doing as we're moving through this process. Senator McQuaid moves to adopt. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is adopted. Now to today's agenda. We are on day 30 today of a federal government shutdown unlike any other. Let's do a quick level set before we begin. In past shutdowns, essential workers have had the assurance that back pay as they tough out weeks without a paycheck. This time, the Trump administration, specifically President Trump, is threatening to withhold back pay to these workers who are keeping our nation afloat. In past shutdowns, our neighbors who rely on SNAP and WIC to put food on the table have had no disruptions in their benefits. But this week, the USDA announced that it would not use emergency funds specifically allocated to this purpose to make sure infants, children, and elders don't go hungry while the congressional majority stonewalls negotiations. In the past, it's been clear where the money that federal agencies use during shutdowns originate. But this month, we saw the Pentagon accepting a $130 million gift from a friend of the president, and he refuses to say who it is from. In today's hearing, we'll hear from union member representing furloughed federal workers in Minnesota and representatives from the TSA, who 2 days ago received their first $0 paycheck, reflecting 2 full weeks of unpaid work. We'll learn about the effect of the shutdown on our farmers and food systems due to closing and understaffed reopening of FSA county offices, as well as paused food inspections among the ongoing avian flu outbreak. And finally, we'll turn to service interruptions hitting our most vulnerable people, SNAP, WIC, and the low-income home energy assistance programs. As a reminder, please reference your packets as we move through the agenda. And members, please hold your questions until the end of the testifier presentations. And now I'd like to call Brian Gartwaite to the table to share your testimony. And while Mr. Gartwaite gets settled, Senator Dibble, I know, has to leave soon, but I'd like to give him an opportunity to share his thoughts. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will try to come back, Madam Chair. I appreciate the indulgence before the hearing is over, but I'm pulled in several directions this morning, so appreciate your indulgence. Madam Chair, I'm glad we are talking about the consequence to federal workers and not receiving pay. Just yesterday, I received a call from a constituent who had just been hired. And I know we're hearing about people being let go, but he actually landed a job. And he's new to Minnesota, does not have yet a Minnesota driver's license or ID. And he has a job in which he's receiving no pay. Affinity Credit Union actually is offering zero-interest loans to help federal workers bridge this period of time, which is a little bit of a lifeline, but he's unable to access that loan without a Minnesota driver's license or ID, and was asking my office to see what I could do to prevail upon the agency to expedite that. So the reality is the consequences are quite real in people's lives. But Madam Chair, we're going to talk a little bit later in the hearing about the effect of the shutdown on SNAP and on LIHEAP we've been talking about already. That is looming. That is more dire than I can even contemplate when you think about the many, many thousands, 1 in 5 kids who rely on SNAP and families who rely on SNAP. So I just wanted to make a few observations and comments about that before I dash away. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the working families of Minnesota and the devastating human consequences that would flow from the elimination of core programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, SNAP and LIHEAP. And like all of you, I am sure you have also heard from parents and seniors and workers and children in your districts whose lives are made possible by the budgetary support represented by SNAP and LIHEAP. So when the Congress or this administration threatens to shut down or cut these lifelines, we are not talking about abstractions or mere budget lines. We're talking about whether or not a child is going to go hungry, whether a senior is going to be cold in the dark, and whether a minimum wage worker has to choose between groceries and a utility bill. And Madam Chair, we know from our visits that we're talking about working people, working poor, people who are working service economy jobs. I'll just note for the record that the multi-billionaires in our country are growing exponentially richer by the day as we sit here and talk while people are struggling and going without. The human stakes for the working people and the working poor, if I can outline quickly, SNAP supports approximately 42 million Americans each month. In Minnesota, the working poor and near poor households rely on SNAP to stretch their modest income, cover food costs when hours are cut or when illness occurs, and that means we strip that cushion. LIHEAP is structured to provide support for heating and cooling costs for low-income households, and as winter approaches, energy bills rise, and without LIHEAP, many families face disconnection, although in Minnesota we do have the disconnect rule, but once that rule clicks off, people are going to have to pay those back bills or be cut off from their energy sources. So for working families, imagine being paid for full-time, yet still one car repair, one unexpected medical bill, one pay cut away from skipping meals or going without heat. And that is the reality in Minnesota, and this legislation and this shutdown is going to deepen that. Beyond individual households, these programs help stabilize our larger community. Food retail jobs, local grocery stores, energy service providers all depend on the ripple effects of this assistance. We learned that in Rochester and on our other visits. Madam Chair, I'll speed this up a little bit. I just wanted to point out that the federal administration can act now. The USDA has contingency funds and is legally obligated to release them for SNAP benefits. That means the president and the executive branch are not powerless. They have the authority to prevent disruption. If they choose not to act, it is a policy decision with real human costs. We're getting some indication that that is penetrating, and so I'm adding to the volume to urge and push our president to act. Similarly for LIHEAP, while the mechanics of release involve program offices, state approvals, this delay is not about funding, it's about federal leadership and prioritization of delivery. As policymakers, we must call out that this does not have to be a philosophical debate. We can preserve food security and heating security for our working families. We can choose cuts that push tens of thousands of Minnesotans into deeper hardship, or we can choose not to. So, Madam Chair, I'll just close by saying that, again, this is not about abstract numbers. We're going to hear from people today. It's about a child whose stomach is growling in class, a working mother choosing between her groceries and her heat, our neighbor who struggles quietly but keeps showing up. Minnesotans cannot afford to be the state where the safety net becomes the trap door. We must insist on timely federal action, partnering state and federal efforts, affirm our values of dignity, opportunity, and shared responsibility. I'm glad the governor has mobilized resources to try to bridge the gap at food shelves, and I think we all need to do the same and rally in our communities to do the same. That is the last stop emergency assistance, especially in light of the cuts to food shelves themselves that the president has already made. I think the situation is extreme and dire and demands our full attention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Mr. Gayright, thank you for your patience. Please introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to come and be with you this morning. I am Brian Garthwaite, President of Local 3381 of the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO, or hereafter AFGE, or L3381. We represent employees of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration, with duty stations in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. I emphasize that my comments this morning are as representative of the employees and do not constitute an official position or statement on behalf of the Food and Drug Administration. FDA employees represented by AFGE 3381 primarily comprise consumer safety officers, or CSOs, who conduct domestic and international inspections and examinations of products that are regulated by FDA. These include food for humans, food for animals, animal drugs and human drugs, medical devices, cosmetics, biologics, and products that are derived from blood and tissues. The CSOs conduct these inspections and investigations to ensure that manufacturers produce, distribute, hold, or import products that are in compliance with federal laws and regulations. In addition, CSOs in the Office of Import Operations conduct entry reviews at our ports of entry of imported products destined for U.S. markets. They may perform field examinations and collect surveillance samples to ensure imported products meet safety standards. As part of enforcement activities, complaint coordinators, recall coordinators, and compliance officers work together in receipt of information from CSOs about non-compliant products and then work swiftly to remove contaminated or non-compliant products from the market and to prevent egregious non-compliant manufacturers from operating and putting the public at risk. Some FDA employees collaborate with and coordinate with and provide training to state, local, tribal, territorial, and foreign counterparts with comparable regulatory public health missions and systems in order to meet the public health goal of safe products. Sometimes these activities arise as an emergency response to a natural disaster, such as a fire or flood or tornado of those kinds of nature. Consumer safety technicians, administrative management specialists, and other personnel maintain inventories of inspection supplies needed by CSOs to conduct their jobs. They ensure that the government fleet of cars used by CSOs are properly serviced and maintained. They assist CSOs and their managers with preparing inspection documents, coordinating meetings, organizing, creating, and disseminating correspondence to regulated industry. They perform internal audits to ensure documents and correspondence conform to internal standards and ensure buildings and facilities are in good working order. During a lapse in appropriations, many of the responsibilities I just highlighted may be curtailed or stopped entirely under the Anti-Deficiency Act, which prohibits making expenditures before funds have been appropriated. The Anti-Deficiency Act does, however, allow exceptions for activities in cases of emergency involving the safety of human life or the protection of property. To that end, FDA employees are either classified as exempt, which means they are not funded by their positions, or the work that they do is not funded by appropriations, but instead by user fees or other funding external to congressional appropriations. Employees may be called accepted or partially accepted. This means they are scheduled to perform or support the performance of the activities involving the safety of human life or protection of property, but they do so in a non-pay status until the shutdown ends. Employees also may be called furloughed. They are placed in a temporary status with duties and without duties and pay because of a lack of appropriations. You may sometimes hear reference to essential and non-essential, which are unfortunate descriptions that are misleading and do not have statutory definitions. Employees of performing the accepted work are characterized as essential, but not all employees who can perform accepted work are classified as accepted. The narrow exceptions permitted under the Anti-Deficiency Act do not typically give broad coverage to allow for that. Non-essential should not be taken to mean unnecessary, and being furloughed should not be taken to mean non-essential or unnecessary. Employees could be accepted or partially accepted one day and furloughed the next, only to be changed back to accepted the next day because of, say, for example, a foodborne illness outbreak or some other emergency that would cause them need to be conducting their follow-up activities. The bottom line is, when a lapse in appropriation causes a lengthy shutdown, FDA employees, like many federal government employees, which to my understanding includes between 17,000 and 18,000 Minnesotans, are or may be performing work without receiving pay while they are doing the work. It is true that current federal law requires affected employees, regardless of their status as accepted or furloughed, to receive back pay when the shutdown ends. However, that promissory note of back pay cannot be used by employees as good faith collateral against their personal costs of living. In preparation for this session and related to preparing communications I've submitted to U.S. senators and U.S. representatives, I asked employees represented by Local 3381 to share their concerns specific to the financial hardships that they will experience as a result of no longer receiving any pay until the end of the shutdown or slightly thereafter, depending on the immediacy of the back pay being received. Interestingly, but not surprisingly, many of the employees would rather talk about their concerns with their coworkers or others in the community than about themselves. However, these are the most common themes. Planning for childcare is stressful enough, but adding the lack of income on a one-income family is added strain. I don't want to have to pay for childcare if I'm home and furloughed, but I could be called back at any time. I cannot let my place in the childcare chain lapse and be without childcare, and I cannot expect, nor should I expect, the childcare provider to hold my place open. Caring for ill parents has become a challenge. Now, being furloughed and partially accepted doesn't mean that employees are free to do as they please, when they want, and wherever they want. They can be called upon to perform their activities at moment's notice, and all personal leave has been canceled. It's expensive to travel on short notice, so meeting the needs of ill parents becomes an even greater challenge. A lot of federal employees and people all over live paycheck to paycheck. And with 3 young children on one income, I'm not sure how I'm going to manage past my last paycheck. This was 2 weeks ago. I cannot apply for unemployment benefits because the partially accepted work I do puts me over 32 hours of work a week. My understanding is under Minnesota law, if you receive more than 32 hours of work, you're not eligible for unemployment benefits. So working too many hours with no pay forecloses the option of unemployment benefits, which I'll emphasize must be paid back anyway after the shutdown ends and back pay is given. But even with back pay, there's concern about how long after the government reopens will that pay eventually be received. In the past, employees have had to wait 10 to 15 days to receive their back pay, and it was not as a lump sum. It was portioned out over the course of several months. And finally, employees cannot commit to a placeholder part-time job for multiple reasons. FDA employees are subject to ethics requirements, and they may not hold outside positions that could be in conflict with the jobs that they perform on a daily basis. Further, employers are not interested in hiring someone who might be called back to perform accepted work and cannot rely upon a consistent schedule. Furthermore, submitting documents necessary for approval of outside work will go nowhere. Employees cannot use their government-sponsored equipment, electronic equipment, to submit their documents, and for that matter, the people who are and would review the documents are furloughed themselves. So in closing, FDA employees represented by Local 3381 want to perform their duties with earnest effort and best thought with full pay. They wake up in the morning after a restless night full of worries, still wanting to go to work. They are not villains, they should not be viewed as such, and do not deserve to be traumatically affected. They will give a full day's labor, and it's reasonable to expect a full day's pay on time. It's important to remember that FDA employees, like all 17,000 to 18,000 federal employees in Minnesota that are affected by the shutdown, are your neighbors, your community, your supporters of school activities and fundraisers, church members, and community volunteers. The shutdown does not equally and equitably impose financial, mental, and physical strain. But as it continues, don't be surprised if federal employees you rely upon have to pull back and tend to their own needs. And those needs are going to have a cascading effect on an already strained support system. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Garthright. Senator May Quaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for testifying. it's sometimes you want to know more and then you hear more and you're terrified. And I want to say to you and your members, like, I hear that. As you were laying out the, just like thinking about the reality of like your paycheck and what it pays for. I have a daughter in daycare. It's $2,000 a month. If we lost a paycheck, we couldn't send her to daycare. And then we'd lose her spot. And then when we got paychecks again, we'd have to wait even longer to get her back in. And that's like an iota of, you know, you have a member with 3 kids, people with aging parents. It's a horrifying reality. And then I'm thinking about what isn't getting inspected. We've seen massive recalls. I mean, we know we don't have people working at farms anymore, so we're seeing more salmonella and more listeria. We had 5 million pounds of prepared meat that has been recalled by Hormel. And I'm like, what are we missing? Or are we only catching that because people are getting sick? So that also, and I thank you for kind of laying that out. I guess I want to ask, I want to know what it feels like to your members to just hear, you know, the president say like, well, people might not get back pay. Like, what does that do to folks? How are people feeling about that?
Mr. Garthwaite?
Thank you for the question. So I was a federal employee for 25 years until my retirement in April, but I agreed to continue on as representative for the local because it was that important to me. And that kind of question comes up, but one of the things that I and my colleagues take pride in is we abide very carefully to the oath of office, where we give loyalty to the country and to the Constitution and to the moral principles above party, person, or government office. And so the discussions about what our elected leaders do don't enter into the workplace very often. And I only know the political leanings of some members because they're more friends than they are co-workers. But specific to your question, it is a drain. It is a mental strain to hear comments like that, although we understand that the Senate, the U.S. Senate is working on measures to ensure that all employees, whether furloughed, accepted, or exempt, will receive back pay.
Senator McQuaid?
Thank you so much. The last thing I want to ask, and then I'll let other members ask questions. If you could describe to me the thing that keeps you up at night, and it's for 2 examples. So one, there's a story about a member, the one that keeps you up at night, like this is the person that I'm the most worried about because of being furloughed, not receiving pay right now, potentially not receiving back pay. And then what is like the piece of work that you're like, this is the piece of work we do that if it's not going to get done right now, everyone should be really concerned or paying attention to that.
Mr. Garthwaite?
Sure. To the first question, I think of the younger of the next generation of federal employees that are early in their careers. They haven't established that fund, that emergency fund that we more experienced federal employees knew that it's probably a good idea to try to establish something because every 6 months there's a continuing resolution and a threat of another shutdown. And so we, you know, unfortunately, I've been through this before in 2013, 2018, 2019. So this is nothing new for me. But those individuals are the ones that wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning and that I think about. They're challenged. They have young families. They are just starting out. They have aging parents that they need to take care of. I gave examples in my testimony of that. The one piece, I am reluctant to name specifics because foodborne illness outbreaks, product contaminations, they don't care who is in office. They don't care what's going on in the world. They just happen. But it is a valid question that you make that because many of the activities that we ordinarily, or I say we, I'm retired, but the employees perform are surveillance activities where they're in monitoring. They might catch a mistake that you know, most manufacturers are honest and diligent in their efforts, but we all maybe take certain approaches that we would probably, after we thought about it, think, there might be a better way to do that. And so those things are being missed. The collaborations with our state counterparts are another aspect that is going to be missed. There's a mutual reliance between the federal government and the state government because there are more facilities and more manufacturers than what FDA employees can cover. And so from time to time, the states will fill in that gap. Perhaps we might be asking, the agency might be asking them to do more. During this time, I don't know. I'm not part of that conversation anymore. So that would be the concerning part.
Thank you.
Senator McQuaid. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and President Barkley, thank you for your testimony. I could not agree more that our federal employees are important and they're performing very important jobs tied to safety, health, many things that we probably don't even realize because they're done and we just expect our world to continue running. So it is very concerning. And I did note that the national president of the union, the AFGE union, I think our largest federal employees union actually, really made a startling statement calling on the Senate to pass a clean CER now and get back pay, get pay to our federal employees and keep them on the job. And I would support that too, but I'm not in Washington, D.C. I'm right here. But I think it's important for us to know, do you also support your national union president in his call telling the Democrats, asking the Democrats, it only takes, I think, about 5 of them to get this cloture vote and get it to the Senate floor. Do you support that national union's president's request that the Democrats pass the clean CR now and let's get people back to work with back pay?
Okay, I'll answer your question, but I'm going to preface it first.
Yes.
It is true that on October 27th, AFG National President Everett Kelly called on Congress to pass a clean resolution to end the shutdown. As national president, he represents over 800,000 federal and DC government workers and carries the burden of fairly and equitably representing the interests of all whom he represents. A careful reading of his statement, which can be found on afge.org, reveals there was nothing about helping or forcing one party or another. As President Kelly noted in a communication to its members, it was a call for dignity, fairness, and respect to the millions of federal employees who ask for nothing more than to serve their country and earn an honest day's wage in return. This should not be a controversial opinion, and AFG has vocally opposed every shutdown in our history. And so I support the position of AFGE. My preference, though, however, is for both parties to go to the table to work. As a union representative, I'm very familiar with the concept of collective bargaining and with good faith bargaining. And in order to achieve good faith bargaining, both parties need to be at the table. And insofar as I am concerned, it gives all the appearance that one party is choosing not to be there. Instead, they are home and they are not participating in what they were elected to do. That's my personal opinion.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for sharing that. I think that's important. I usually try to focus on those things right here that we have control over at our state. There's many things, rampant fraud, for example, all those things that we should be focused on. But this hearing is about federal issues. And I would note, you know, the House has passed that continuing CR many times. So has the U.S. Senate tried, but it only takes just about 5 more bipartisan Democrats to join the bipartisan number needed, 60, to get that CR on the up for a vote. So I will register at this point my absolute disappointment that our own U.S. senators continue to vote against opening our government every time. And I'm just telling you, it only takes 5 Democrats to join with the Republicans to say, let's pass a clean CR. Let's get people back to work. Let's make sure Minnesotans are getting the food they need. Let's make sure Minnesotans are getting the services they need. And yes, there are other things to talk about as well, that's for sure. But the clean CRs are what has always been done. That's what should be done now. And I will register that it's disappointing that my U.S. senators, both, have continued to vote no and keep this government shut down. And we're going to hear the rest of today how this is damaging and hurting Minnesotans. Of all, as you mentioned, it is not a partisan thing. The damage being done from this is hurting everyone. And it's not just in Minnesota. It is a bipartisan, self-inflicted wound that is hurting Minnesotans. So I'll look forward to hearing the rest of the testimony. And I do appreciate your testimony as well. And also understanding your national president representing all of the federal employees, which he needs to do. And we need to get that clean CR passed out there and get these paychecks into Minnesotans' hands and the services that our people deserve. Thank you.
Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I recently served in a trifecta. And so I can tell you that when you are in a trifecta, you have all the power. But there's one thing that we do in Minnesota government where you need bipartisan votes. It's our bonding bill. And never in the history of Minnesota has the party in power put forward a bonding bill that only has the priorities of the party in power and said, minority party, you have to vote for this. And we won't do anything to earn your votes. And if you want something in it, too bad. We need your votes, but we're not going to give you anything for it. That's not how government works. That's not how democracy works. And so I'll tell you today, the Senate Republicans and the federal Senate could end the shutdown. They could change the rules of the Senate and end the shutdown. They have the power to do that. They have the trifecta. They can do pretty much anything they want to. The thing they can't do is force Democrats to vote for a bill that doesn't include a priority of theirs, which is lowering premiums for people who today are logging on to see how much they've gone up. And so I also want this shutdown to end. I want the parties at the table. And I can tell you, having been in a trifecta, there wasn't no negotiating. There is negotiating. That's how things work. But they do have to be at the table, and they do have to accept the fact that in order to get votes, you have to have a conversation about the things that you need people to vote for that they want. That's how things go. And so I really appreciate your work here and your members, because I'm looking at that number. You said 17,000 to 18,000 employees in Minnesota. We should remember that those are people who aren't getting paychecks, therefore they're not paying taxes. I don't know what their taxes would be paying for right now. We don't have anything, but they're not paying taxes. They're not shopping. They're not going to the Mall of America or coming to the Minnesota Zoo in my district. They're not going out to eat. They're not getting donuts in the morning with their kids. They're not, buying groceries. That is going to have a devastating effect in Minnesota. 17,000 to 18,000 employees being impacted just from your union. That's all told.
That's across multiple agencies and multiple federal offices.
Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that clarification, but that is a huge chunk of the Minnesota workforce, on top of a declining economy and rising inflation and layoffs. And we're going to see that show up over and over again. So I really appreciate you coming in and laying out that reality for us and making it human, because it's easy to throw around numbers, but we shouldn't be throwing around people. And that's really who's at the center of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garthwaite, for your testimony. Members, we have to move on. I will now call Mark Johnson and Neil Gossman to the table. Gentlemen, if you would introduce yourselves for the record and present your testimony.
Thank you all. I appreciate the time to be here. My name is Mark Johnson. I am the local president for Local 899, which also incorporates Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. My duty station is in Duluth, Minnesota, and I have been doing this for 18 years. This is not my first rodeo either.
My name is Neil Gossman. I'm treasurer of AFGE Local 899. That's American Federation of Government Employees. It's the same umbrella union as the previous testifier. I'm currently a transportation security officer at MSP Airport. I've been there for over 21 years. And I'm treasurer, as I said, and I'm going to let Mark do most of the talking.
So as I alluded to, I came down from Duluth, Minnesota today. Kind of a foggy drive, obviously, but in order to do that, I had to take a furlough day. What that means to me is that because of the uncertainty of if we're not going to get paid, I may be here doing this on my own time, which is obviously very important to me. That's why I'm here. My big ask today is, as Brian alluded to, there's 17 to 18,000 people that are federal employees in the state of Minnesota. There are roughly 900 to 1,000 of those are TSA employees through the state of Minnesota. We are now going to need help. And what we're looking for is a comprehensive list of where we can find those help. Last Thursday in the roundtable, we had a really good dialogue. Thank you, Ms. Chairman, for putting that together. But we need to go further. We've got people that, the TSA is historically one of the lowest paid government entities. Pay equity helped us about 3 years ago, but we're still not where we should be. We have such a gamut of what we have for employees. We have the 18-year-old that's going to college and is a part-timer. We have folks like Neil who are closer to the end of his TSA career who I think can probably withstand the holdout, the shutdown, or the lapse of government funding a little bit better than some of us. I've got officers that have come to me that say, my rent is due on November 1st. I don't have the funds for that. My landlord is unwilling to work with me. And oh, by the way, they told me there was going to be a $50 per day late fee. How do people sustain that when you are not, we are paycheck to paycheck, many of us are. We have many families that are double income for TSA. Some of them have younger kids. How do they sustain what they're doing without help? And basically that's what we're here for today, is we're looking for help for our officers, and not just in Minneapolis, for statewide. There are 8 airports in the state of Minnesota. And to varying degrees, people have reached out to me and said, how do I do this? How do I get help? I need a contact, a point of contact, and like I said, a comprehensive list. We need people who need help for, as Brian said, daycare facilities. People are saying, okay, so do I put gas in my vehicle and go to work, or do I feed my children, or do I feed myself? We are accepted employees. We go to work. We are hardworking Minnesotans. We show up. We have not collected a paycheck. This will be going up on a full paycheck. And we're now into the second pay period where we will not collect a check, it looks like, unless we can have our elected officials come together and get us either a continuing resolution or pass a budget. We need help with all of that. We are going to be leaning on, look, we're a bunch of, as I said, we're hard working Minnesotans. We're proud of the jobs that we do. We show up, and every part and every aspect of this, of what we do, is critical. All the way from the original, the check-in of travel documents, all the way through the very end of it, which basically is everything is run through the x-ray. We are critical. If one piece of that link is disrupted, we could have major consequences. Nobody here wants to see what that looks like again. I guarantee it. With the holiday season coming up, it's an extra stressor. We will see thousands upon thousands of people traveling for the holidays. We don't need this extra stress. We've got people, like I said, that say, what can the union do for me? Well, we're here. That's why we are here. We are trying to get help for our officers. I need help. We need help. And we don't want to be that, these benefits that are for the lower income families that we are now going to have to rely upon, we don't want to do that. We just want to get paid for the job that we're doing. And in order to do that, we need to get Congress together with the Senate, and we need everybody to sit down and hash it out.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Senator May-Quade?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mark. I hear everything that you're saying. I want to make sure that I have a list because I want to try to at least assemble that contact list that you're asking about. I wrote down daycare, food, gas, housing. Is there anything else you would want to add to that list? Food is the place that I'm most intricately familiar with, and so I feel like I can be helpful at least connecting folks to resources. I'm also working to help connect people who have food to get that to places. So like, you know, people have a big wedding and not everybody eats the food. Can that go someplace where there's a prepared meal, so on and so forth? Smaller grocery stores that aren't big retailers, they don't do food rescue there. Can we get that started? But is there anything else you would add to that list that I might not be thinking of?
Honestly, it's anything that's monetary at this point.
Okay. Clothing, winter, yeah.
Clothing, you know, heating costs.
Yeah.
Duluth, you know, we're a little bit chillier than you guys are. Our heating, you know, and even up north, farther than us, International Falls, Thief River Falls, their heating season already started. So we've already got people that are heating their houses with that extra cost, and it shows. I personally, I'm good for about a month. That's it, and then I expend the what I have for resources monetarily, and then I got to start scratching my head and figuring it out too.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Senator May-Quade. That is something my office is looking at too. We'll add housing to that list. That's emergency rental assistance is another place that we are looking at how we can assist and making sure that people have resources. Mr. Johnson, has your agency or the administration given any guidance for workers on how to get resources or how to help them through this period?
There has been some resources that have been put out by the HR that is working. Some of them have been furloughed, so our HR is actually carrying that extra burden because some of those people that work in the HR have been furloughed. So they're trying to help as much as they can.
Thank you very much. Members, any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to add one or two things.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize what Mark said. We have a high-stress job. We think about the consequences, but on the immediate level, we are dealing day in and day out with tens of thousands of passengers coming through, and we have to screen every single one. It's obtrusive, of course, what we do with passengers. We have to try to do this with a smile and be nice, and at the same time be alert and a little bit suspicious of everybody that comes into the airport. That doesn't make an easy job. We try to be diligent in the job, and we try to avoid distractions. Boy, oh boy, is a shutdown a distraction, okay? We're trying to keep our minds to the jobs, but this is not a sustainable long-term security situation. I'm going to suggest one policy thing that you may want to look at when things are slower and more calm, is that the state consider the long-term options for security at the Minnesota airports in the future, so that airports are not affected by shutdowns. The MSP airport budget contribution to the state economy is approximately half of what the state's budget is every year. You do not want disruptions. You do not want a disrupted workforce. You want a confident workforce that's dedicated to doing its job. In the meantime, we have, yesterday, people took boxes of food home after the shift that were contributed by outside parties. Thank you very much. We are aware there are hundreds of thousands of people about to lose food stamps, and we're in a long line of people that have similar concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, very much for bringing the stories to us. Mr. Johnson.
Okay, I would like to echo what Brian said, and I actually have the direct quote from our president of the AFGE, Everett Kelly, and that is, it's time for our leaders to start focusing on how to solve problems for the American people rather than on who is going to get the blame for the shutdown. There's no partisanship in this. We need our elected officials to please get together and hammer this out. We need this because it's just, it affects not just us and our families, but it has a trickle down to the entirety of Minnesota as we're speaking about this, and North Dakota and South Dakota for my constituents out there. This is at day 30, as you pointed out. Day 35 is the longest shutdown that we've ever seen. I'd like to hope that we wouldn't set another record for that, but I'm just not sure.
Thank you both for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Auden Parkinson, could you please come forward? If you would introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony when you're ready.
Hello, everyone. My name is Auden Parkinson. I'm here as a representative for Local 3748, also of AFGE, like my predecessors in this hearing. I work for the United States Department of Agriculture's Agriculture Research Service. We're not necessarily one of the agencies that would be thought of as essential during a government shutdown. We're not the most public-facing, but the impediment of us being able to accomplish our task has long-reaching consequences. To read my pre-written script, I live in Morris, Minnesota. I work for the ARS. Today I'm here as a representative to speak to the experience of members of my local that I've spoken to during this current government shutdown. As ARS employees, we do research that addresses issues farmers and consumers are dealing with now. Work our agency does results in monetary benefits for farmers and the overall economy, as well as food, fuel, and clothing security for consumers. When unable to do our full jobs due to a government shutdown or other administrative circumstance, there is a loss for the taxpayer that we are very conscious of as being the people on the ground doing our research. Data benefiting producers and consumers is lost. Research gets postponed indefinitely, and deadlines for publishing results of our research aren't met. Therefore, they're not made available to the public. We do our work as efficiently as our studies allow, but shutdowns like this one hinder our ability to, as a personal example, get the crops we spent a full summer, full growing season cultivating out of the field before we are frozen off our farm. The work we do is stuff that private industry won't do because of how the costs and profits balance out. Myself and many other ARS employees work here because we want to see our neighbors and communities flourish. Employees required to go into work without pay are currently having to worry about balancing that unpaid time with any additional part-time job that they've taken on so that they can get their bills covered. As my predecessors have stated, many federal employees who are accepted and required to come into work are having issues applying for unemployment because they're still working their full 8 hours a day. The furloughed employees who aren't required to work that I've talked to have been feeling extremely guilty because they can't do anything to assist the people who have been required to go in. The current impact of the shutdown is that many federal employees have had to file for unemployment, visit their local food shelves, take on additional jobs, and just do what they can to make ends meet while not necessarily knowing what resources are available to them due to issues with communication from the administration. Come November 1st, I know that there's going to be a lot of talk on if us federal employees will have access to our insurance benefits still because that's when our open season starts. And And I feel that I don't really have anything additional to add because people prior to me did such an excellent job covering what the impacts are to federal employees currently. If you'd like to hear more about the agriculture research specifically or my research, I'm happy to talk to that.
Thank you very much. I just have one question about like the timing because of Minnesota winters, because of planting seasons and the research you do. If this like chunk of time goes into past when the grounds are frozen, what does that do for like the timeline moving into next year?
For research facilities that have field studies that require being out on farmland, if they have crops that need to be planted before the winter hits, such as winter rye or winter oil seeds, that's not happening. So those research projects can be delayed over a year. For preparing ground prior to freeze for spring working, such as doing tillage treatments, if that doesn't get done, there aren't really a lot of adjustments that can be made. Working with plants and animals as a researcher, you have to be flexible because unpredictable things happen all the time. Ultimately, it makes accomplishing the research very difficult, and those of us who have been, continuing to work past administrative hiccups, we're hyper conscious of how we're spending taxpayer funds to accomplish our jobs.
Thank you. Members, any final questions? Thank you very much. Oh, Senator Marty.
Madam Chair, not a question for the witness, but just a general comment about the discussion earlier about the very thoughtful statement of AFGE nationally about calling for an immediate end to the shutdown. And I want to make sure, I think it's very clear they did not blame Democratic Party. They did not blame anybody in particular. They said, get back to the table and negotiate and work this out now. And the only time that I've seen any federal employees blame Democrats for the shutdown was in the out-of-office messages that the administration changed after they left the office, blaming Democrats. And that's so offensive to take somebody's email and change their messages on them. They're suing the Trump administration on that. So I think the union have been very clear. They want this to end because it's hurting all of us, and it's not something to blame one party, the Democratic members of the Senate. As Senator McQuaid pointed out, they can change the rules if they want. I mean, they've shown a willingness to ignore the law, to go against the Constitution. They certainly can change the rules if that's their intent, but the smart thing to do is just negotiate as we've done here. When you need votes from somebody, you ask and you negotiate with them, and it's a simple thing. So I just want to be clear that I think their statement was excellent. It was clearly nonpartisan, and the only people who are saying they're blaming Democrats are Republicans who want to cast blame, and I'd say it's just grossly unfair because, again, they care so much about trying to make it sound like they're blaming Democrats, they'll change out-of-office voice messages. That's really offensive.
Senator Nelson, a quick response before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the further discussion because I think it is really critical. And I'll just be really clear that the quote was the president of the American Federation of Government Employees calls on Congress to pass a, quote, clean continuing resolution, end quote. That's very clear. That's what has been requested. And to say that it's about leverage, I think is exactly what the House Minority Whip, Catherine Clark, said. It's kind of like, sure, there's going to be pain, but we need this leverage. I'll just read her quote directly to make sure that you have it, and I'll put it in quotes. She said, this is House Minority Whip Catherine Clark, who said, shutdowns are terrible, and of course there will be terrible. Families that are going to suffer. We take that responsibility very seriously, but it is one of the few leverage times that we have. She said that in mid-October. So, and also I heard my colleague at this table say it's leverage. I am sorry, I do not believe keeping federal employees from doing their jobs and their paychecks is leverage. Now, if you want to talk about that, we could talk about that. But I think this committee, our job is to talk about how this decision, however the public sees it weighing out in Washington, D.C., is impacting Minnesota. And that's what I would expect us to do. And there are plenty of impacts, and they're being felt bipartisanly by all. And so I think we all are in agreement that set the leverage aside, bring up a clean resolution as has been asked, and then look for leverage on those other things that are so important, but they're not part of continuing the budget. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I agree. I think we are all very concerned about the hardships facing federal workers, Minnesotans on SNAP, and all the Minnesotans who are looking today at their insurance costs during open enrollment, in some cases quadrupling. Minnesotans can't afford any of that. And we have to understand the reality of what is facing workers across our country and across our state, because these various issues are piling up and making it incredibly difficult for people to make just the everyday decisions to feed their family, to house their families, to do their jobs, and to have access to health care. So thank you very much for your testimony. Members, we are going to move on. Oh, yes.
Could I take the mic to speak personally to something that Senator Marty said?
Please.
As a citizen of a rural community, I would like to make the comment that I'm very aware of my position as a federal employee and how I talk to the people that I live next to. I know that myself and my coworkers have been very aware of speaking in a partisan way in recent months. And as just a person, with the changing of out of office messages and the changing of the banners at the top of our facility web pages, I'm incredibly hurt at how my place of work that I'm very proud of has been made to seem now. And I only hope that my neighbors give us grace going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Members, we are going to move on to the federal shutdown's impact on services that Minnesotans rely on, and we're going to pick up the pace a little bit through this. So first we'll hear an update from our Department of Agriculture and directors who oversee our food inspection and Board of Animal Health. Could Dr. Nicole Nesser, Dr. Brian Hoffs, and Pater please join us at the table? And if you all could please introduce yourselves for the record before you begin your testimony, and then begin as soon as you're ready.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Dr. Nicole Nesser. I'm the director of our Dairy and Meat Inspection Division at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and I'll be talking a little bit today about our food safety programs and the impacts the federal funding has on those. I do have a presentation to share, so can I just plug in here?
Yep.
All right, I think we're good.
And members, this slideshow is also in your packets if you want to follow along that way.
All right, so at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, our mission is put up on this slide, is to enhance all Minnesotans' quality of life by equitably ensuring the integrity of our food supply, the health of our environment, and the strength and resilience of our agriculture economy. This has been our mission for many, many years, and we feel it really represents what we do well. Today I'm going to talk a lot about our food supply, and then I have Dr. Hapes here today as well from the Board of Animal Health to talk about how that intersects as well with animal health and our food systems. All right, so our Dairy and Meat Inspection Division is primarily made up of two food safety-based inspection programs, the Dairy Inspection Program and the Minnesota Meat and Poultry Inspection Program. We ensure the safety of food produced in Minnesota through regulatory work such as inspections, sampling, and investigations that relate to our dairy, meat, poultry, and egg products. And the work we do is mandated inspection. And so in order for example, meat and poultry processors to wholesale their products, or for a local farmer to sell their meat and poultry products directly to consumers, they require our inspection services, so they are mandatory. If we don't provide that service, that meat processor cannot operate. So we are considered essential in that sense. In terms of our dairy inspection work, our services are actually mandatory for interstate commerce, and so we require, these products require inspection both by our state and federal counterparts in order to move into interstate commerce. We also do response to emergencies and foodborne outbreaks, so we are the primary agency responsible for investigating some of the scenarios that have been brought up. If a product is identified with salmonella, we do the trace back on the food manufacturing or the farm side of that, as well as other kinds of contaminants like metal that was earlier mentioned. Primarily at MDA, the program that is most affected by the federal funding issues right now is our Minnesota Meat and Poultry Inspection Program. We operate with a federal match grant, so with up to 50% funds from USDA Food Safety Inspection Service. This is a cooperative agreement we get each year. We did get our cooperative agreement signed by our state officials prior to October 1st. However, we did not receive the signed copy back from USDA, and as of now, our cooperative agreement is unfunded. We do, and we're very grateful for the state and the Minnesota funding that we received for our program. We actually have been receiving cuts on the federal side for several years, and thankfully we received an additional state allocation this year. That's coming in pretty handy this year because we don't have that federal funding right now. So we are relying solely right now on state funding. Because of that 50%, we have state funding to operate until about March 2026. However, the outlook is very much unknown. So even if there's a a continuing resolution passed, last year was a great example. We did not get communications from USDA about what we are allowed to spend on the federal side, and therefore we are very much in flux. It's very difficult to hire staff, not knowing how much funding you're going to get. We take pride in staffing very efficiently, appropriately for our work levels. However, with a couple of vacancies right now, we're really struggling to know whether or how we can fill those. As was noted earlier testimony, that inspection work at meat processors is considered essential, and so USDA in this shutdown, as well as in previous shutdowns, as well as when there's continuing resolutions on the table, let us know that we can continue to perform our services and that they are assuring us that they will be providing that funding. However, we don't have anything in writing to say that right now. Fortunately, our dairy inspection program, which does inspection work that relates very closely to interstate commerce, is actually fully state funded. We receive no federal funds for that program, and so that program is unaffected right now. We also have our Food and Feed Safety Division, and this is a division that covers both human food, so the manufacture of other foods other than animal foods, such as bakeries, grocery stores, all kinds of other human foods are covered, as well as animal food. So they also regulate feed mills and pet food manufacturing companies and that kind of thing. So they do a lot of the response as well to the foodborne illness outbreaks and emergencies. And so they actually closely partner with the Food and Drug Administration, which was noted earlier. Both our Dairy and Meat Inspection Division and Food and Feed Safety Division work closely with our partners at USDA and FDA. Right now, we are left with, if something happens, we have to email someone and then look at their out-of-office message to see who that bounces back to and try to track someone down if we need someone. In some cases, we found someone, in some cases, we haven't, and so we're kind of left without that partner on the other side. Right now, on the Food and Feed Safety Division, our work has not been disrupted due to the federal shutdown. We, as noted with our meat inspection program, we've actually been receiving federal cuts for a couple of years leading up to this, and that is the same on our food inspection program. And so we have been working to sort of transform that funding structure a little bit so that we are more reliant on state funding as opposed to federal funding. And so they rely less on that. As noted, all FDA activities that they would partner with, if they are emergency or foodborne illness, they would continue. However, it is definitely delayed responses in those cases because there hasn't been clear communication about who to contact when you have something that comes up, or if we have an illness and we need a trace back product. It's a lot of tracking down people. So. And then there would be an impact if there's a new facility that requires a USDA or FDA inspection prior to operating. There would be no one to do that, and so that facility would be left waiting. I think that's a summary of what we have at MDA for the federal impacts. And before I turn over to the Board of Animal Health, I guess I'll open it up for questions related to that.
Senator Make-Wade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions. You talked about partnership with the FDA and USDA, and so then the state has to cover that. What has that meant practically for the state, for the workers, for the work itself? And I know that we had the termination even before the shutdown of, what was it, 6,500 food safety and inspection service folks, and then like 1,600 animal and plant health inspection service folks. So what is like the state of food inspection and safety now that we've seen that decimation of the workforce and during the shutdown? Tell me about that.
Dr. Nesser?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Senator. So we closely partner on things like emergency response, foodborne illness, as well as what I'm going to call compliance. And so that's kind of investigating situations where someone isn't in compliance with the food safety requirements or the law. Maybe they don't have the right license or permit, or and so I'll just maybe share an example on the meat inspection side. We have what's called a compliance officer. That person is responsible for conducting those investigations. So, for example, if we get a complaint that someone is distributing chickens out of the back of their truck in, a city in Minnesota, typically we are going to go investigate that because that wouldn't have been properly inspected. Maybe it's in the middle of the summer, it's like they're all heated up. It would be a very significant food safety concern. In those cases, for example, maybe we identify who did that and they're from Wisconsin, not Minnesota, or a neighboring state. Well, that we would need to refer to the USDA because that is across state lines. So, well, right now there is actually no one to refer that complaint to at USDA. And this has been of course, right now during the shutdown, it's very hard to track someone down. But even prior to that, with the staffing changes and the shifts in priorities, it's been very difficult. We had a situation where we couldn't find anyone to contact for 3 weeks. So, and we eventually that person came back, but we couldn't track that down. And so that's just an example of we're constantly trying to find a person to contact. We have cooperative agreements. Often we've had the person we normally reach out to is laid off or switches into a different job, or was given a different assignment, and we don't know who the person is, and so we're left trying to. So in most cases, it's pretty significant delays, but in some of the more severe cases, it could certainly have an impact on food safety or animal health.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think part of what I'm thinking about is Minnesota is one of the top producers of, I mean, I think we are the top producer of turkeys. We're about to arrive at Thanksgiving. I'm worried. Should I be?
Dr. Nesser.
Madam Chair and Senator. Well, I think Dr. Haves will have more to say about turkeys, but in general, as was noted earlier, the actual inspectors in meat and poultry processors are considered essential. And so I think we can still be very confident that those turkeys that are going to slaughter are still being looked at by inspectors and that those plants are staffed. And as I noted, if there are no inspectors, those plants cannot operate. So there's not a, they're kind of getting by with a lower staff or whatever. They actually have to staff them in order for those plants to operate. And so while we might have some delays or slowdowns which could impact supply, really the inspectors are still there and present inspecting those products.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My last question. Are those inspectors being paid or are they doing this work without pay?
Dr. Nesser.
Madam Chair and Senator. So on the state side, we're relying on state funds, and so our inspectors are all being paid. On the federal side, I believe that they're without pay, just like the rest of the federal workers.
Thank you.
And members, there is an article also in your packets about the avian flu moving through Minnesota and the amount of flocks that are being affected. Thank you very much, Dr. Nesser.
Committee members, my name is Dr. Brian Hayes. I'm the Minnesota State Veterinarian and Executive Director for the Minnesota Board of Animal Health. As you've got this in your pamphlet, I'm going to skim through some of these slides just in the interest of time. The first one here is kind of a history. Basically, overall mission of my agency is to protect the health and well-being of domestic species in Minnesota. So we're talking about, everyone knows us for our response to high-path avian influenza, but we also have a vital role in other species too. We deal with horse diseases, we deal with companion animal diseases as well. And that's kind of what I want to illustrate, and then also kind of illustrate the impacts we're receiving from the shutdown aren't necessarily monetary, but they're staffing, because we rely very heavily on our USDA partners locally. Since it's our big show, I will start with our highly pathogenic avian influenza update. Minnesota is the most affected state. That should be logical. Some people are alarmed by that, but I need to remind people we are the #1 turkey producing state in the country, and we're the land of 10,000 lakes. So those two in combination cause us to have the most cases. This particular virus is usually spread by migratory waterfowl, so we expect to see cases rise in the spring and in the fall when migration happens. And fortunately or unfortunately, we have a lot of turkeys that sit in between lakes. So that being said, from the start of this incident, and this really goes back to spring of 22. That's kind of when the current incident started. We've had some lulls here and there, but it's considered the same incident. 51 counties have been affected and 208 confirmed cases in Minnesota. Our more recent case started in September of this year. So we enjoyed a little reprieve, spring and summer, and then had our first case September 16th, and we are currently at 23 cases in Minnesota. Nationwide, we have 30 commercial flocks, 35 backyard flocks. So this is a heat map that kind of shows, again, Minnesota is the most represented state. Of those 30 commercial flocks, 20 of those come from Minnesota. Of the 35 backyard flocks, 3 of those come from Minnesota. Some other diseases of note, and I'm going to kind of do these in reverse order. I want to start with that bottom one. Avian metapneumovirus is another disease of poultry that's been pretty devastating in Minnesota, actually as devastating, if not more, than highly pathogenic avian influenza. Part of the issue with that disease is it is not considered federally reportable. So highly pathogenic avian influenza is still considered a foreign animal disease, although it's basically ubiquitous here in the United States. But it's still treated as federally reportable, which means we get federal help with responding to that disease. Avian metapneumovirus is not. It's reportable to us in the state, and that limits our resources and ability to respond. So it's a good comparison and contrast between those two diseases because they're both really devastating to our poultry producers. And avian metapneumovirus kind of illustrates how slow it is to respond to a disease when we don't have help with our federal partners. That's not related to the shutdown. That's just how this disease is viewed. We're highly affected by that, again, because we're the #1 turkey producing state. Other diseases or infestations, I should say, that are in the news, New World screwworm. So this is a parasite that has been eradicated from the United States for decades, but suddenly this, almost a year ago, it was detected in southern Mexico and has subsequently moved closer and closer. Last detection was within 70 miles of the Texas border. So it's a parasite that infects all warm-blooded animals, and that includes us. So it's a little bit different kind of critter. It's a maggot, and it's a maggot that likes to feed on living tissue. So this is something that's pretty devastating to our cattle industry, to our horse industry. We have a lot of interaction with animals in Mexico and the U.S. So those are the species that we first consider a risk. But here in Minnesota, the fly probably isn't going to survive too long, but we have additional risks. We have people that vacation with their pets. So this has been something that we've raised an alarm in northern states and New England states that this isn't just a southern border concern. This is a concern for our folks that are traveling with their pets and potentially traveling to areas that are infested with this particular parasite. African swine fever is a devastating disease in swine, obviously. Minnesota is #2 in pork production. So this is a disease we've been keeping very close tabs on. Since about 2019, we've been doing a lot of exercises, a lot of developing plans on how we will respond. In general, this disease was across the ocean. We didn't concern ourselves too much with the proximity of it. But in 2022, the disease was detected in the Dominican Republic. So suddenly it moved to our hemisphere, and it's very close to our borders and close to our Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So we have some bigger concerns. Couple more diseases I just want to bring to light that are currently active here in Minnesota. Canine brucellosis, we monitor this very closely. We have cases of this that show up from time to time. There's hot spots that dogs are brought in from different areas by rescue groups. Unfortunately, this is a disease that's hard to detect in young dogs, so it doesn't show up until later in life. And unfortunately, people have adopted puppies and are faced with the devastating news that your family member either needs to be quarantined for life or humanely euthanized. Rabies is another disease that's been kind of rampant here in Minnesota as of late. The last 2 years have been record years for that disease as well. I'm bringing all these diseases to light just to kind of illustrate what we do in our agency and show you that we're busy. We've got a lot of stuff going on, not just bird flu. We're dealing with a lot of things, and we rely very heavily on partners to handle this. So we're a very small agency. We're small but mighty, but we rely heavily on our partners at Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Minnesota Department of Health, and our local USDA veterinary services. So we have USDA officials that are embedded in our incident management team, local staff. The response to emergencies is considered essential work, so those folks are getting paid for that work. When I say we rely on them for our day-to-day activities too. So some of our kennel inspections, some of our servant program inspections, market inspections, those are all duties that we share with our partners, local USDA partners, that are not allowed to do that during the shutdown. So it creates more burden for our small staff. We have to take on the extra inspections that are left behind by those that the USDA is unable to fill. A couple other things of note, 20% of our budget does come from the federal government, so we do get 20% of our allocations in cooperative agreement funds from USDA. Those are safe. We are secure with those through the fiscal year. The question is beyond that. So we noticed some disruptions earlier this year in our cooperative agreement funding with the change in administration. There was some reconsideration of what and how those would be distributed. We eventually were able to secure those again, but it's always the question what happens next year. Other things to point out are our local veterinary medical officers. So those are the USDA veterinarians that assist us. Currently, we have 4 that are assigned to Minnesota. That's a number that's down from 7. And that's not related to the shutdown. That's related to RIF and some of the consolidation and reorganization that happened within the USDA. Other things that I guess factor into that or are part of that is with the reorganization of the USDA, as Dr. Neeser mentioned, we have a difficult time finding the right people to answer our questions. Some of the people that were experts and had the institutional knowledge to assist us with a lot of our response are gone, and they've been replaced with someone else who's learning the position. So there's a learning curve that's happening that we are struggling a bit with. The communication is not the same as it used to be. The other small bullet point there is our VMOs also get deployed to other states. So our USDA folks get paid if they're working on an emergency response. If we don't have enough for them to do here, they get deployed elsewhere. And then if we need them, we don't have them. So it's, unfortunately, we try to keep them busy with emergency work. If we don't have it, they get sent elsewhere. And then my last bullet point is the USDA contingency plan for the federal shutdown has also been removed from the website. So we don't know why, but that's kind of the status of where we're at with communications. We don't get a lot of direct communication like we used to. There's kind of decisions being made that we aren't always privy to, and we find out about them after the fact. And with that, I will take any questions.
Members, Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this. This is very, very, very helpful. Can you tell me what the USDA contingency plan that's been removed would do for you if it was there?
Madam Chair and Senator, yeah, it just gives us kind of a roadmap of what to expect. So who do you have in these roles that we need to contact? Who's next in chain of command? How do we get a hold of who we need to if we have another disease outbreak? So foot and mouth disease is a disease I didn't mention, but that's a real scary one. That's one that keeps me awake at night because it affects so many species. Where do we go with that? So right now we kind of know in Minnesota how to deal with highly pathogenic avian influenza. We have a pathway. What do we do if the next shoe falls? We don't have that contingency plan now. So you've removed a lot of our day-to-day work, but then what happens with some of our additional emergency work? Or if things change, it's a dynamic process when we're responding to a disease, even bird flu. Things change in how the response is done. So that contingency plan kind of gave us the template or roadmap to follow.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so just to repeat back, if I'm hearing it correctly, in previous iterations, there would be this, federal contingency plan, a roadmap. If one of these diseases that maybe keeps you up at night but isn't here yet or hasn't, come as close to Minnesota, but all of a sudden it does, right? Minnesota is surrounded by other states, diseases don't stop at state lines. You wouldn't have a way to currently alert a federal partner or know who to alert to say, hey, this is happening in Minnesota now, so now you have to turn attention to this entire area. Am I repeating that back correctly?
Yeah. Madam Chair and Senator, yes, to an extent. We certainly still have contacts. So we have an area vet in charge in Minnesota that I could contact. But it's the spider web of support beyond that. So heaven forbid we get one of these other diseases that we don't currently have. How do we respond? I don't think any of us as state veterinarians has a full grasp of what that is. We used to do a lot of preparing for these kinds of things. African swine fever plans, foot and mouth disease plans. Our federal partners aren't at the table for that anymore because they're not allowed to. So it's kind of a gray zone. It's what happens, I guess, is the question that contingency plan was supposed to help answer or give us just a direction to go.
Madam Chair.
Senator Mary Quay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate that. I think that maybe this committee could be renamed like things that currently didn't keep us up at night and now should because it's keeping other people up at night. Running the government it's a really serious job, and pretty much everybody who does it like cares about the thing that they do, and they show up every day at work to be just like really serious professionals in their area, whether it's human services or education or the USDA. That's really the work, and it's stuff that most of us, we live our lives thankfully not thinking about it, because the professional smart people who do the work are doing their job, and so we don't have to think about it. We don't have to think if does this lettuce have salmonella on it, or did this cow have or swine have some sort of flu, or I have a 3-year-old, so I think about hand, foot, and mouth all the time, but I don't think about it for animals. You do, and I would like to never think about it for animals. And so when you have just like this hatchet that is being taken to our federal government, we've had already before the shutdown so many employees let go willy-nilly. I mean, we've had to let them go and hire them back, and let them go and hire them back. Now they have to do a job and they don't get paid. This is really serious stuff, and I want our federal government and the leaders in the federal government to be interested in governing. And it's not sexy. It's boring on purpose so that our lives can be fun and our lives can be free and we can have joy and thrive, because all the serious, professional people get to do their job at work and then they get to go home and do that. And so that over and over and over again today, what I'm hearing is the really important work that happens so that we don't have to worry and think about, all of these other things, because we have literal doctors sitting there that worry about it for us. And, I'm really sorry that we are where we are, but also Minnesotans need to know that there are now serious smart professionals at state agencies that don't have federal partners or a roadmap should there be some sort of outbreak. I mean, we just lived through a pandemic. We know how fast it can come around. And so it has to be said, because it is serious work, and it's being done so unseriously right now that it's heartbreaking to me. So I thank you for continuing to do your work and for bringing it and kind of elevating it for us. And I'll take in a little bit of that. I'll wake up every once in a while and think about canine rabies. I'll think about rabies. And maybe we'll work on mandatory vaccines for cats and dogs. But thank you for your work, and it just needs to be done really seriously, and we need that from our federal partners right now.
Thank you, Senator Mary Quaid.
I just wanted to make one point of clarification. Hand, foot, and mouth disease isn't the same as foot and mouth disease. And I know that firsthand because I just had 4 kids that went through it last week. So, yeah, never had it, and suddenly I've got 4 kids at home. But it's a very different virus, but kind of the same lesions. It's just more devastating in animals.
Assistant Commissioner.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair, members. For the record, my name is Peter Chesed, Assistant Commissioner to Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Madam Chair, I accompanied my colleagues here today in case there were questions from the committee that were outside of their jurisdiction, but I can save you all some time because I have no prepared testimony.
Nice to see you again, Peter.
Good to see you.
Senator Nelson, did you quickly have some questions?
Oh, I did. Actually, they were for the previous testifier, Commissioner, but you might want to weigh in as well. Basically, I just wanted to thank the doctor for weighing in and explaining really the things that many of us don't know about, that is keeping our food safe and keeping us safe. That is so critical, and I appreciated your comments. I also was interested in to find out that we didn't have mandatory vaccine rabies for dogs. So something perhaps we can take a look at. But there must be a reason for that, but I don't understand it at this point. But I did want to just note again how important this is, and also the great job you did in explaining the partnership with the federal government and how important that is. And again, I think that is all the more reason why this continuing resolution needs to be signed right away. And we, in the Board of Animal Health, great ag community in general. I used to serve on the ag community in one of my earlier Senate terms here. Very highly respected, nonpartisan, working on those issues that are really important to all of us in a very bipartisan way. And I want you to know I appreciate that here at our state government. As do my constituents, of course, and also that we just need some of that bipartisanship at that federal level too, so that we can get you those federal partners back in the saddle that you need. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your testimony, for joining us today. We appreciate it, and I'm certain we will stay in contact as this continues.
Thank you.
If we will now turn to the Low-Income Housing Energy Assistance Program. Michael Schmidt and Cameron Crothers, if you would join at the table, and we also have Trey on Zoom. We'll start with Michael Schmidt, then move to Carmen, then on to Trey, and if folks can just try to keep testimony as short as possible and hit on sort of the new pieces. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak about the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. My name is Michael Schmitz, and I am the Director of the Energy Assistance Program at the Minnesota Department of Commerce. For those of you who don't know, LIHEAP, as it's known at the federal level, has been around since the early 80s, and it's intended to help assist income-qualified Minnesotans and others around the country to stay safe and healthy during the winter in particular. In Minnesota, we call it the Minnesota Energy Assistance Program, and it's administered by the Department of Commerce and through 28 local service providers, mostly community action agencies. The people that it serves in the state tend to have very low incomes. The average annual income for recipients of the program is about $24,000. They spend about $2,500 on their home energy, so that's over 10% of their annual income. Our benefits are primarily bill payment assistance. We provide benefits between $200 to $2,000 annually per household, and then we also do repair and replacement of heating systems like furnaces and boilers that aren't working. Last year, we received approximately $125 million and served 125,600 households, and that's almost 300,000 people in the state. It's essential to our greater Minnesota communities in particular. About 2/3 of LIHEAP funding annually goes to greater Minnesota. And about 75% of LIHEAP recipients in Minnesota are most vulnerable. So that includes seniors, households with small children, households with members who have a disability, and so on. The program impact is huge at the individual level. So you can think about it this way: lives are saved by preventing and addressing emergency loss of heat in one of the coldest climates in the United States. Family homes are not condemned due to cold weather damage that can be caused by a lack of heat. You can think burst pipes, that kind of thing. Families and the elderly aren't evicted for failure to keep their utilities connected. Low-income families with children don't have to make a choice between heating and eating. And then low-income school-age children are able to focus on homework in a warm home with lights. The impact of the shutdown is pretty substantial. Under normal circumstances, Congress would either have passed a new budget or a continuing resolution by October 1st, right? And then Minnesota, typically in both of those scenarios, would receive about 90% of our annual award, and that would come anywhere between, I think the earliest I've seen it is mid-October, but typically it's more like November 1st, so we would be expecting our award right around now. And when we get that funding, we can start making payments for households, right? And right now, we don't have enough funding to be able to do that, right? We have a little bit that we're carrying over just to keep processing applications to get ready for when the funds come so that we can start getting benefits out to folks. So we're not able to issue bill payment assistance benefits. We are able to help with repair and replacement of furnaces at this point. We have about $3 million that we carried over that we're using to help folks who, when they turn on their heat for the first time, they find it's not working. So that's a really important thing that we are able to do right now. We do have over 80,000 applications already. The program is very front-loaded. Typically, we spend a lot more money at the beginning of the year, and it kind of tapers off as we go because, when it's cold, people need that help right away. We have shut-off protections in the state of Minnesota, but we serve about 22,000 households who heat with propane and fuel oil. And they don't get that kind of protection, right? So if they can't pay for a delivery, they often can't get a delivery. So that's what we're concerned about right now. So even if a continuing resolution were signed today, it'd probably still take a month for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to get us the funds. And we're not sure if that month is accurate. It's possible it could be longer. The entire LIHEAP staff was fired in the spring, and so we're not really sure what that impact will have on the program. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can you? So in the spring, the entire LIHEAP staff federal staff was fired.
Yes.
And so as we're going into this program now, we don't, as shutdown aside, we didn't have real guidance and partnership on how that was going to work with no staff.
So my understanding is that they've taken some staff who were working on the community services block grant and had them kind of fill in to do some of the work of LIHEAP staff, but it's not clear how that's going to impact how long it takes to get the funding out. There's some key things that they have to do, like they basically get the funding amount and they put it into a formula, make sure that that's accurate, and that has to get approved by the White House, and then we get awards.
So this is where that institutional knowledge of civil servants who work administration over administration over administration and do these same jobs, learn from each other, learn the systems, I'm guessing like could have an impact if we don't have those folks who know how to do those steps that you just said, or it's new to them, could increase times when people, I think we have an article in our packets, but I think 11% of Minnesota homes are heated by propane. Like that could have a huge impact if people aren't able to get, if it takes another month after the shutdown for folks to get support out there. So
I would say a month is typical, so it's unclear how it will impact us.
thank you. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also had the same reaction. I was like, whoa, so all the LIHEAP staff are gone. But I'm looking at the same article, and so I guess so most people who are impacted by the cold weather rule, most people who don't benefit from that, I should say, whose company can turn off their heat for non-payment, live in greater Minnesota. My in-laws live in greater Minnesota. I have some in Southwest, and I have some in Duluth. And so and that's where I believe most of the LIHEAP money goes. So what is going to happen, and at what point should I be worried about seniors freezing because of the delays, the shutdown?
So my understanding is that all utilities in the state are required to follow the cold weather rule. So just to be clear, so it's really those households who heat with delivered fuels like propane and fuel oil who are not protected by that. I think I'm always worried about people not being able to heat their homes. And so we've already asked utilities to hold off on disconnections for households who have applied for energy assistance. So one other thing is that a lot of people don't realize is that the cold weather rule doesn't mean you won't get disconnected. You have to make and keep a payment arrangement. And so that's why we've asked utilities to hold off while we're waiting. I think with delivered fuels, when you talk to folks who run those companies, there are several hundred of them in the state. Some of them are very small, some of them are much larger. They have very small margins often, and so they're not necessarily able to provide a delivery on credit without knowing that they're going to get paid. A lot of them, they work with the same customers in the same communities year after year, and so they're still willing to do it. But it really depends, I think, on the company, on the relationship that you have with them. And so there's no guarantee for folks who heat with those fuel types.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. Yes, people who have their fuel delivered and not through a power company. And so, so it's 11% of households in Minnesota, but it's what percent in greater Minnesota? And when is this cliff coming? Is I think the thing I'm looking for is, or has it already happened and you're just here to tell us about that?
I would say the vast majority of households who heat with fuel oil and propane are in greater Minnesota. There are not very many in the metro area. In terms of the cliff, a lot of households will have a partial tank still available from the spring. They might be able to heat with that for a time. It's really hard to tell when people will have that need to get a delivery. A lot of people probably already need it, right? Some people are able to proactively pay for a fill in the summer, right? And they might be able to get a better deal if they pay for it in the summer, but they might not all have the ability to do that. So you'll find people who will say, well, I have to make this trade-off. Am I going to skimp on food so that I can pay for heat? Am I going to skimp on buying or paying for a prescription or other things? And then make up for it after the fact. People go into their savings, they use credit, whatever they can to pay for heat in a place like Minnesota.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you. And in previous shutdowns, has this been the case as well, or is this a place where there could be emergency fund used and like SNAP, the Trump administration Republicans are choosing not to?
So I believe in previous shutdowns, there have been different scenarios. So I think in the 2018-19 shutdown, there was initially a continuing resolution. So we did have funding on October 1st. And with that, we were able to get our award. And then the shutdown happened, I believe it started in December. So that was basically after the continuing resolutions expired. So we had our funding, and because we were able to draw down on those funds, once we have them awarded, it wasn't really an issue for energy assistance. And so this is a little different than it was in the past.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you so much. We know how important heat is. I know I've had to have my furnace on already. It's getting pretty cold at night. I'm hoping you can further elaborate on the distinction between a previous shutdown where there were continuing resolutions, so you were able to have that money to keep people in heated homes, as opposed to what it looks like now, because there hasn't been that continuing resolution. Does that kind of explain that?
So I think the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services budget has passed before October 1 time in my time with energy assistance, and I've been working for the energy assistance team since 2012, so for many years, right? So typically we have a continuing resolution on October 1st. And so when that happens, the Office of Management and Budget at the federal level, they're basically able to, at their discretion, provide up to 90% of our previous year's award. And that's typically what we get, and that's around November 1st. And we get that because our funding is really front-loaded. As you can imagine, when it starts getting cold, that's when people apply. That's why we have over 50% of the applications we're gonna get for the entire year already. And so as soon as they pass a continuing resolution, Department of Health and Human Services basically starts this process of getting awards out to states, and we get that. And so I think when they weren't able to come to an agreement in 2018-19 on that, that final budget, or even another continuing resolution, and there was a shutdown, it shut down the federal government, but we already had our award at that point. So it was a little different.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was unaware of that. So not passing this continuing resolution is making the ability for Minnesotans, for people all across our nation, to get the heating assistance that they would have gotten during other shutdowns, where there was a continuing resolution, all those things everybody agree on, and then they got to the end and they couldn't agree on a few things in DC, so there was a shutdown, but you were already able to have had those funds during the continuing resolution to continue to provide that, that warmth that we need, especially in Minnesota. This just puts another exclamation point onto why our friends out in DC need to pass the continuing resolution now. And all the things that are not totally agreed upon, like health insurance coverage for those who are here illegally, I know that's a big sticking point. It was clearly here in Minnesota. Those things can be handled, but I think I was totally unaware that the LIHEAP funding could have been funded, front-loaded with a continuing resolution. So again, another reason why our senators in DC, particularly representing a cold weather state like Minnesota, should really take this seriously and then debate any remaining issues as they come forward. So thank you. And thank you for explaining how the process works, even though it's further concerning as to what's happening right now.
Senator McQuaid, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it safe to say that the folks who use LIHEAP, I mean, I know it's called the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, but they're low income folks? Is that accurate?
It is.
Director?
We prefer to say income qualified, but they are low income, yeah.
Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's really important that we talk about people as whole people. So if someone is income qualified or makes low income, they're usually in need of more than just one thing. So they would be in need of SNAP benefits, which the Trump administration, as he gallivants around the world, coming home to the United States for 3 days to play golf and then leaving again, chooses not to put money towards. They also probably need health insurance that is cheaper than what is on the market with subsidies. And so the decision before our federal government right now is either let the premium subsidies expire and 89,000 Minnesotans have their premiums double or more, which you might end up seeing more folks coming to you for help, or they will go without health insurance and get sicker and have more acute needs, and then we blow up the DHS budget, or they could pass the extension for the subsidies, pass the CR, heat people's homes, get SNAP, get WIC to people. Like, this is not a hard decision because it's all the same people that we're talking about over and over and over again. In this shutdown, while we have Republicans refusing to extend ACA subsidies, we're adding more people to the pool that need help, not less. And a clean CR would add more people to the pool that need help, not reduce it. And so I just don't want to pretend like the group that needs LIHEAP is different from the group that needs health insurance costs lowered, that's different from the group that needs SNAP, that's different than the group that needs special education. Like, these are the same populations of people, and we cannot just pretend as if leaving health insurance premiums to double or more for 89,000 Minnesotans is somehow an acceptable solution to getting people's heat. They need both. So let's really focus on what we're doing here, because the idea that 89,000 Minnesotans needing healthcare costs that are even an iota affordable is somehow like not a thing we should be talking about. Well, we would just be right back here talking about how we're going to help those people get LIHEAP, and those people get SNAP, and those people get transportation assistance and housing assistance. That's what we're talking about. We can help all of those people if Republicans in Congress would just do that. Or they could change the rules of their Senate, and they could vote through their clean CR and screw 89,000 Minnesotans and their health insurance premiums. Those are the choices, and none of them require Democrats to do anything.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid. We are, because of timing, going to jump to our Zoom testifier. Trey, if you would come off mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. If you could just introduce yourself for the record and then present your testimony.
Sure. My name is Treverna Douglas. I am a CAP-HC community sector and board member as well.
Welcome to the committee. Please present your testimony.
Thank you. I also am a receiver of the energy assistance. This is a fund that's helped me because I was, due to the pandemic and everything, it changed my career totally. So I have to go about the services that I provide. I'm in makeup, hair, and wardrobe in the film industry, so things have shifted tremendously. So now not being a freelancer, I'm going into being someone who works for themselves. With that, I needed a lot of help, and the energy assistance got me through the winter. Well, that's one of the more difficult times because there's low work for me. So as a benefiter, it helped me get through so many times where I just didn't have enough to get. It was either pay this or pay that. So the energy assistance helped me in that way. As a community board member, I'm also able to know that there's more than just my story. There's over 30,000 applicants that send in their application and only about 21,000 get help, but that's still a large number, considering the fact that there's 30,000. Just like me, that 21,000 other household people receive that help, which help redirect the small amount of income that we have, that's gonna go to utilities or food or healthcare. As a energy assistance program, CAP-HC is more temporary measures than to reduce the burden for people with low income, such as myself. It keeps adults and children in safe places during the winter months. As you all know, Minnesota is one of the coldest places here, and it's a benefit to us to have the cold weather rule. But again, like the gentleman was saying before, it's not always, they can still turn those things off if you can't pay the bill or if the bill is extremely high. So without this program, thousands of people will go without either getting evicted, because that does evict you. You can get evicted if you have a large energy bill. You could either get your house, you can either get evicted, you can get your house condemned. There's so many things, and we don't always have the option to choose. It's either feed our children or pay this bill. And so knowing that this is something that we're struggling with, choosing whether or not to give us these benefits, it's ridiculous.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll turn now to Carmen Crothers, the Outreach Director from CUB. Welcome to the committee. If you could just introduce yourself for the record and then present your testimony.
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Carmen Crothers. I'm the Outreach Director for the Citizens Utility Board, also known as CUB. CUB is a nonprofit advocate for Minnesota's residential energy consumers. In my role as Outreach Director, I attend community events across the state and talk directly with consumers about their energy issues, concerns, and options. I also regularly support consumers over the phone and via email. People call us about all sorts of energy-related topics, but the most frequent reason is when someone is behind on their energy bill or dealing with an electric or gas service being shut off. The focus of our outreach work is to understand a customer situation by listening closely, asking questions, and then connecting them with resources to help address whatever their issue or concern is. We really try to help people where they're at and explain their options in a way that's easy to understand. The consumer interactions we have across the state influence our organization's advocacy and policy work. I'm here today to share some insights from recent experiences interacting with Minnesotans struggling to pay their energy bills. I hope that hearing some of these stories provides additional understanding into what Minnesota families are dealing with as they try to manage all of their household needs, including keeping their electricity on and their homes heated. I recently attended an outreach event at a food shelf in central Minnesota. We attended with partner organizations who provided important energy resources like window cleaning for efficiency and comfort, energy saving tips, energy assistance applications, and other program information. The most important work we did that day was talking with people seeking help with their energy bills. This included a household who was already shut off, other households facing shutoffs, and those trying to be proactive to get bills under control. These households are facing very challenging situations, and the struggle with an energy bill is often just one symptom of a greater financial stress. We spoke with one gentleman who is currently looking for work, but has been advised by his spouse's doctor to only work part-time because he is the caregiver to his wife. We spoke with a woman who had a major medical surgery scheduled and will need time to recover. Another gentleman shared that this was the first time in 20 years he had been unemployed. I could tell he was uncomfortable and likely overwhelmed to have to be in a position to seek assistance. It may not have been something he had to do before. These people exhibit humbleness and humility and a determination to improve their situations. For example, there was a question about what it would take to buy a home rather than to continuing to rent, with the goal that it would reduce housing costs to be a homeowner in the long run. These are people who may be facing permanent, temporary, or intermittent financial challenges. This is the reality for thousands of Minnesotans. Sometimes situations improve, sometimes they don't, and unfortunately, sometimes they get worse. These examples are indicative of the types of conversation CUB has on a regular basis. We should all recognize that any certain set of unfortunate circumstances, whether it be of losing a job or experiencing a health setback, can lead to a cascade of financial concerns that would result in the inability to keep up with energy bills. It may not even be an unfortunate circumstance that makes it difficult to pay bills. It can simply be that wages are not high enough to cover the cost of living, and people have to constantly reprioritize what gets paid when. The ability to pay energy bills allows us to function, meet our basic needs, and have a comfortable home. When the inability to pay a bill leads to a shutoff, it creates all sorts of additional problems. Food goes bad, you can't charge your phone, can't do laundry. If you're in a rural area and have a well and septic, that's not gonna work. The home can get uncomfortably hot or cold, and the list goes on. We and other organizations work really hard to give consumers the tools available to prevent a shutoff from happening or get the power or gas turned back on. In closing, I would like to encourage all of you to attend events or volunteer at social service organizations such as food shelves to have opportunities to interact with folks trying to get by and to hear their stories. While I regularly talk on the phone with consumers, having a conversation face-to-face is a much richer, impactful human experience. Every interaction we have helps to ground us in our work and helps motivate us to continue to seek both short and long-term solutions to help our residents afford their energy bills. We greatly appreciate your interest in the topic of energy affordability, and I'm happy to take any questions. If you have any policy-related questions or comments, our executive, Annie Levinson-Falk, is available here as well.
Thank you very much for bringing that perspective. Appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony. We will move now to the impacts, to hear about the impacts on WIC and SNAP. First from Alex Fitzsimmons from the Children's Defense Fund, and then on Zoom, Dominique Butler. Welcome to the committee, Ms. Fitzsimmons. If you would just introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Special Committee. My name is Alexandra Fitzsimmons, and I'm the Senior Policy Director with Children's Defense Fund Minnesota. We're a statewide organization committed to advancing policies and programs that improve the health and well-being of Minnesota children, especially those who have been pushed to the margins. I'm here today to speak on behalf of our youngest members, infants, babies, toddlers, preschoolers, and their caregivers, many of whom are pregnant or breastfeeding. We're gravely concerned about the potential ending or interruption of critical supports available through WIC. The history, goals, and outcomes of the WIC program directly align with CDF's work to ensure that all children grow up with dignity, hope, and joy. Marian Wright Edelman, who founded Children's Defense Fund more than 60 years ago, was a leading national advocate for WIC during its formative years. Her passionate advocacy for child health, nutrition, poverty alleviation helped ensure that WIC not only was created, but sustained and improved over time. WIC is not just a program. It is a cornerstone of our nation's public health infrastructure and nutritional safety net. It was piloted in 1972 under President Richard Nixon in response to growing concern over malnutrition among mothers and children who were living and growing up in poverty. The first WIC site opened in Kentucky in 1974, and Minnesota joined later that same year. It was established as a permanent federal program in 1975, and for 5 decades it has served as a lifeline for families with low incomes, offering not only access to nutritious foods, but breastfeeding support, nutrition education, and referrals to a wide range of health and social services. Today, WIC serves nearly 7 million participants nationwide, including 101,000 Minnesotans each month. Nearly 60% of Minnesota's WIC participants are children who haven't yet celebrated their 5th birthday. And in 2023, more than 1/3 of all infants born in Minnesota were served by WIC, 38%. 62,000 babies were born that year. Each month, 22,000 women are served by WIC, and for many of the women who are part of the WIC program and are pregnant, it is their first step toward a healthy pregnancy. The evidence supporting WIC's effectiveness is overwhelming. Over nearly 5 decades, researchers have documented its impact on key measures of child and maternal health. There are 6 areas of impact I will highlight. I will go quickly because we really want to focus on where we do think the impacts will be if funding is not continued. But first, with healthier birth outcomes. WIC participation reduces premature births, babies born at low birth weight, and infant mortality. Improved nutrition. The program has helped reshape food environments for many, many families and communities. The third would be better healthcare access. Children in WIC families are more likely to receive immunizations and preventative care. Fourth, stronger cognitive development. Children whose parents participated in WIC during pregnancy score higher on developmental assessments when the children are 2 years old. Fifth would be in reducing health disparities and racial disparities, of which this committee knows well. We have significant disparities here in Minnesota. WIC participation helps narrow those disparities in both birth outcomes and in breastfeeding rates. And then lastly, the economic impact. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, every $1 invested in WIC saves up to $3.13 in Medicaid costs, and yields $2.48 in savings through reduced medical, educational, and productivity costs. WIC is a medically necessary intervention. It's based on the principle that healthy food is medicine. Pediatricians routinely ask families about food insecurity during well-child visits because nutrition is foundational to development. Denying WIC benefits during a government shutdown is not just a budgetary oversight, it is a public emergency. And just lastly here, I do want to focus on what losing access would mean for children and families. And oftentimes, we're concerned about being hyperbolic as advocates. In this situation, this isn't hyperbole. Losing access to WIC would result broadly in increased hunger, poorer health outcomes, and greater financial strain for thousands of pregnant women, infants, and young children in Minnesota. Immediate consequences would be, number one, of course, would be food insecurity. Families will lose access to essential nutrition, including infant formula, and pregnant and breastfeeding women will face increased risk of malnutrition, which can harm fetal development and maternal health. Also, another immediate effect would be social and emotional stress, because we really can't fully quantify the social and emotional stress caused by the uncertainty surrounding the availability of these medically necessary benefits. In terms of the longer run, it depends on how long we're looking at WIC being interrupted. But in terms of what potential consequences would be, we can potentially see higher rates of premature births and infant mortality. And I don't know how, if we know that there is this direct link between the program and how our infants are doing, that we're not doing everything we can to ensure that this program continues forward. Second would be with health and developmental risks. Infants and young children are more likely to experience poor nutrition and growth delays, increased risk of anemia, lower immunization rates, reduced access to preventive care, and then again, increases in developmental delays because of the referrals that are made to Help Me Grow, referrals that are made for early intervention services. Next again would be a widening of the disparities that we already have in place. There would also be economic costs, not just for families who are under even greater economic strain and are already stretching their limited budgets, but also local economies will suffer too. We were in Mankato just yesterday talking about child well-being data, and there was somebody from the local food shelf there who talked about how with the funding that Governor Walz already announced in terms of going to for food support, food assistance, that they would likely see about $5,000 of that money. I won't talk about the food because I know that somebody else is here, but in terms of Congressional District 1, where we were, $93 million in benefits go to the local grocery stores in that area. Increased healthcare costs, and then lastly, greater pressure on emergency services. WIC is not optional, it's essential. Losing WIC supports would jeopardize the health, development, and dignity of many children and families in Minnesota and obviously throughout our country. These consequences ripple far beyond the kitchen, touching every aspect of life, from birth outcomes to school readiness to economic stability. WIC is a promise. It's a promise for more than 60 years, a promise that every child will have a healthy start, that no mother should have to choose between feeding herself and feeding her baby or young child, and that our nation and our state will stand up for its youngest members and carry them until they are able to crawl, walk, or ride a bike. We must keep that promise. And thank you for having this conversation, and thank you for your time and your continual commitment to our children.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzsimmons. Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that excellent testimony about WIC. We know how incredibly important that is, and you did a very good job of speaking to that. Remind me, it's a mix, I think, of federal funding and state funding. Can you elaborate on a couple things for me on that funding piece? And then also, I'm curious how much WIC funding is in jeopardy at this point because of the federal WIC funding to Minnesota that is in jeopardy because of the shutdown.
Ms. Fitzsimmons.
Yes, Madam Chair, Senator Nelson. In terms of funding, so I would say nationally, WIC is a $7 billion program. In Minnesota, for fiscal year '25, we received $151 million of funding for the program. I am not the person, unfortunately, to speak about those pieces. I can get that information, and I know exactly where it is because the WIC website is incredible. The information that's available on that website that we have here with the Minnesota Department of Health is amazing. So I know exactly where I can get that, and I will send it to you after the hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator
And
Nelson.
Thank you so much. I recall at one point, Minnesota, we funded WIC more so even than the feds required because we believe and we know how important that is. So I would appreciate that information when you get that. Thank you so much.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think I'm the member on the committee that has a child closest to birth age, and so I remember those first 6 months, babies can't eat anything else other than breast milk or formula, nothing else. And I spent my time right before coming to the legislature. I worked in store at the largest dry dairy grocery in the state of Minnesota. And I remember that the theft of formula was one of the most common pieces of loss that we would have. Because if a mom is looking at her baby and she can't feed her baby, right, if you can't breastfeed for myriad reasons, you will choose to steal formula before letting your baby starve. And like I've said this over and over today, but the choices before us cannot be, well, we can fund low-income home energy assistance programs and WIC and SNAP and not health insurance. Like that doesn't have to be the choice we make. I want the choice to be we can do all of it. If we can afford $150 million for 2 private jets for the Secretary of DHS, we can afford WIC and health insurance premiums. If we can afford a golden ballroom and private companies have all this money to donate and not pay their workers enough that they need SNAP, but they can donate $100 million for a golden ballroom, we can afford WIC and SNAP and premium subsidies. And so I really appreciate you putting the heart into it because there's nothing I've never been a crazier person than when I was feeding my kid from my body and worried every day that I wouldn't be able to do it, even though I could afford formula. Like there's just nothing that sends you into this atmosphere of just craze because your whole job is to keep that baby alive. And it's either with your body or with your pocketbook. And so if this program goes away or if it's even delayed, we will see that very, very real fear in, 101,000 Minnesotans in this state, and I don't want us to get there. I want us to be able to do all the things because we can do all the things. So thank you for bringing that here.
Ms. Fitzsimmons, we'd really like to keep in touch with you over the coming weeks as we learn more about potential WIC funding as if this shutdown continues, because this would be grave consequences for Minnesota. Thank you for your testimony. We do have a WIC user that we'll hear from quickly. Dominique Butler, if you're on Zoom, you can come off of mute and turn your camera on.
Yeah, it's Dominique Buffett. But good afternoon, Chair Port and members of the committee.
Thank you so much, Dominique. Please present your testimony.
My name is Dominique Buffett, and I'm a proud parent from Minneapolis. I'm someone who has directly benefited from the WIC program, not only as a low-income parent, but now as a foster caregiver. WIC has a true lifeline for my family. It helped me make sure all my children, both biological and foster kids, have access to healthy foods, formula, and the nutrition education we need to build healthy habits. For families like mine, every bit of support matters. WIC didn't just help feed my family, it protected my child's health. It was through a routine WIC screening that my child had dangerously high lead levels. The staff didn't just stop there. They helped me figure out where the lead was coming from and walked me through a step-by-step process to take care of it, and supported me until we fixed the problem. If it weren't for WIC, who knows where my baby's life and health could have gone. They caught something that could have caused permanent damage and gave me the tools to act quickly. Now that I'm fostering, I see how essential programs like WIC are for caregivers who step into care with little notice. WIC helps us provide immediate stability, healthy meals, formula, and reassurance that these children are being nurtured and cared for from day one. WIC is not just a food program, it's a safety net, it's an education hub, it's a health protection system for our most vulnerable families and children. I'm asking you please continue to fund and expand WIC because every child deserves a healthy start and every caregiver deserves that kind of support behind them. Thank you for listening to our stories. WIC truly saves lives and I'm living proof of that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Butler. Members, we're now going to turn to Attorney General Ellison, who will detail a recent action his office has taken this week to address the USDA's decision to not tap into reserve dollars to keep the SNAP program running. Welcome to the committee, Attorney General. Please introduce yourself for the record and present your testimony.
Chair Port and Vice Chair Kupek, Ranking Member Nelson, and all members, thank you all very much for having me here today. I do sincerely appreciate you devoting your time, energy to this absolutely critical matter. My name is Keith Ellison, and I'm the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. And it's really an honor to be here. I want to thank you for focusing on the federal government shutdown and the impact on Minnesotans. And I'd like to address a step that I've taken as Attorney General to protect hungry Minnesotans, Minnesota families during the shutdown. 2 days ago, I co-led a coalition of 26 states to file a lawsuit against the United States Department of Agriculture for unlawfully suspending the Supplemental Nutrition Program, food stamps. As you know, food stamps helps about 42 million hungry Americans buy food every single month. That includes more than 440,000 Minnesotans, nearly 500,000. 45% of them, nearly half, 45%, live in greater Minnesota. Among Minnesotans, SNAP recipients are about 180,000 children. And I realize the last testifier spoke about children. About 72,000 seniors, 52,000 people with disabilities. In our lawsuit, we argue that the United States Department of Agriculture, USAG, suspension of SNAP benefits during the shutdown is illegal and is arbitrary and capricious in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. Indeed, as we speak, literally right now, 11 o'clock East Coast time, attorneys for our coalition are in court in Massachusetts arguing for a temporary restraining order to block USAGs from halting SNAP funding. I led this coalition in filing this lawsuit because it's intolerable that nearly 1/2 million Minnesotans could go hungry when the law clearly provides for funding to help them eat. Across previous federal government shutdowns, SNAP benefits have never been interrupted by a lapse in appropriations. Until now. On August 10th, USAG suspended SNAP benefits for November, claiming insufficient funds. But this is not the case. USAG has access to an estimated $6 million, nearly $6 billion, in emergency supplemental funds that Congress appropriated for the very purpose of keeping SNAP funds flowing during a potential government shutdown. As late as September 30th of this year, USAG itself acknowledged Congress's intent that SNAP operations should continue with contingency funding during a shutdown. This has long been the policy of USAG. During the 2019 government shutdown, that is during the first Trump administration, USAG repeatedly confirmed that the contingency funding was available to continue providing SNAP benefits. USAG did so again in preparation for a shutdown in 2021. So this is not new. Furthermore, during the current shutdown, USAG has funded other programs like WIC with emergency funds, but has still refused to fund SNAP. It is clear that the federal government is making deliberate, illegal, inhumane choice to keep hungry Minnesotans from getting their food. This choice will not only harm individual families, it will strain state and local governments, community organizations, as people increasingly rely on emergency services and local food pantries that are already struggling to fill the growing nutrition gap. I applaud Governor Walz for stepping into the breach yesterday and announcing $4 million in assistance to food banks while the federal government withholds funds from Congress that Congress has already appropriated for the purpose of keeping people fed during the shutdown. And as important as it is to have that $4 million in assistance to food banks, it does not come close to covering the $73 million in SNAP that Minnesota should have received this coming November. Put another way, the $300 million that is funding the White House East Wing Ballroom could fund 4 months of SNAP benefits in Minnesota. The administration's refusal to fund SNAP will also hurt our school districts, where school food insecurity will stand in the way of educating our children. Suspending SNAP benefits will also harm hundreds of thousands of grocers and merchants across the country that accept SNAP payments for food purchases. U.S. Ag has estimated that every $1 in SNAP benefits generates at least $1.54, $1.54 in economic activity. And that's important in a slowing economy, which we have. Where Congress has clearly spoken, U.S. Ag does not have the legal authority to say otherwise. The coalition I co-led is asking the court to immediately turn benefits back on to prevent further harm to residents. So, Madam Chair and members, the illegality of the government's actions aside, I've seen some people object to the annual cost of SNAP, but allow me to break it down to you. That annual price tag translates to an average of $190.59 in food benefits per person per month, or $356 and change per household per month. These are U.S. Ag's own figures. The Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Family estimates that every day a Minnesotan on SNAP receives about $5.50, not a king's ransom. I respectfully submit that no one in this room could feed themselves on or their families on $191 a month, or $356 a month, or $5.50 a day, particularly not at a time of escalating and high food prices that have not come down since January 20th, as promised. Finally, I note that the administration, which is illegally withholding the $6 billion Congress has appropriated to keep Americans fed during the shutdown, it has managed to find $40 billion to bail out Argentina. We've spent $170 million on airplanes for the Secretary of Homeland Security. I believe we stand a strong chance of success in our lawsuit, and I hope the court moves swiftly to immediately compel U.S. Ag to continue funding SNAP during the shutdown. But it's important to state clearly that if we are successful, SNAP funding will not flow nationwide. Rather, it will only flow to the plaintiff states like Minnesota and Wisconsin that sued U.S. Ag to release the funds. Non-plaintiff states will not, and that makes me sad. By contrast, our neighbors in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Iowa, whose states did not sue on their behalf to fight the administration's illegal freeze of funds, won't receive those benefits, and people there will suffer. And this is tragic in my view. Put simply, if dollars for SNAP start flowing in Minnesota during the shutdown, it will only be because we sued to keep Minnesotans from going hungry. So, Madam Chair and members, I'm happy to take any questions, but mostly I just want to thank you for your faithful service to the people of this wonderful state.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Sobering, certainly. This is not the first lawsuit you've been a part of in this administration. Can you give us any insight on like a case like this where it is clearly time sensitive? What can we expect in terms of how quickly both the courts will move, but then also once there is a ruling, if there's a ruling that tells the administration they have to turn it back on, what do we know about how long that will take?
Madam Chair, this is an excellent question because it's the question we're all asking ourselves. So the court granted us a hearing today, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So the hearing is probably 20 minutes in right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we hear something before I walk through that door. We're expecting to hear quickly. The court is fully briefed, and the government is, they've submitted, they're participating as well. And so the court could rule from the bench. The court does have that prerogative. It is somewhat unusual for courts to rule from the bench, but they certainly could, and they have since January 20th in the 41 lawsuits that I've been forced to have to file. So we're hoping that it could be right away. Now, let's say we do get a good ruling, and I'm pretty sure we will, and I'd be shocked if we don't, because it's clearly illegal. It's not because we're wonderful lawyers, though I believe we are. It is because this is flagrantly illegal. Then we have to depend upon the administration to comply with the court's order. Now, in all fairness to the administration, when we've sued and courts have said, send that money to the states that have Congress has appropriated the money to, the money has flowed. There are some immigration matters that where I think it is a good faith, honest reading is that the administration flouted the court's order. In just about all the appropriation related orders that we've sued the federal government on, they have complied. So I expect them to comply. And so, but again, these things take some time. And so we hope that they'll be back on by the weekend, but it could be Monday. Now, I will tell you this, we're prepared and have been ready for the court to flout. I mean, even though the administration has not flouted the financial or congressionally appropriated funds related lawsuits, we're prepared to act if they do, and we'll go back into court and argue that they should be held in contempt for refusing to obey the court's order. So we got our plan A, B, C, D, E, and we expect that we'll have the outcomes that are required.
We appreciate you fighting for Minnesotans on these programs, and I share your concern that it would only be the states that were willing to do this, put in this lawsuit. Thank you very much. We'll let you get back to your hearing now.
Thank you, and thanks all members.
Thank you very much. We will move to Rory and Mary on Zoom. And while they are testifying, Carrie Thompson, you can make your way to the table and get yourself set up. Rory, if you're able to bring yourself on camera and off of mute, you can introduce yourself and begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Okay, hi, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my story about the government and the shutdown and how the SNAP benefits affect me. Okay, I do not consider myself a single mom. I'm a solo parent, okay? And I'm a survivor of domestic violence, thus a solo parent, okay? My son is now 16, and his father has been absent since he was 3 months old. And after that, he made many poor choices, and he got a 17-year prison sentence. So literally, it has been just me financially supporting my son without public assistance, okay? Then on my own, and without child support, obviously. Clearly, I've always been a very hard worker. 3.5 years ago, my life drastically changed. One morning, while I was starting my day, I had to text my son, who was in the next room, to call 911. I went into emergency surgery for a ruptured brain aneurysm. And I was in the ICU for 52 days. I survived 2 strokes and sepsis, okay? Thankfully, I had a short-term disability insurance policy, and I also had a 401k account. And I had to cash out my 401k account to support us, okay? Part of my rehab, I was in an intensive brain injury program, okay? And I must have vented like my financial stresses, and a social worker led me to my county for support and for SNAP. Okay, and okay, so I did apply for Social Security disability, and even with Social Security disability, they suggested for me to apply for SNAP. Okay, and anybody that knows the Social Security disability system knows it's incredibly long. It's a very long process. Okay. A judge did fully disable me, okay? But in the same breath, it was only a partially favorable decision. And so I won my case, but then I got cut off because I was, quote, underage and retrainable. But I have a traumatic brain injury, and the judge did fully disable me. So with that, then I had to turn around and reapply, okay? So now I'm right back to square one. Me, my son, no income, no child support, and I have no other resources, okay? And it's not like I can work harder or more to make up for it, okay? And so I have utilized food shelves, okay? But I have to be really careful with what foods I eat because, again, I survived 2 strokes. So I can't, like, canned foods, processed foods, I can't eat those. I have to eat like healthy food, right? And even my son, you know, a 16-year-old, he works so hard in school. He's so helpful at home. He's amazing. He deserves to be able to eat good and healthy food as well, okay? And that's what I have to share. I thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rory. Senator Mayquade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Rory, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and really giving us insight to the cascading life events that we don't have control over and that we need support afterwards. And I also just want to say, you know, your son sounds wonderful, and I always love to hear parents talk about how great their kids are. And so thank you for coming today and sharing your story, because it's very vulnerable to share that much, but it's so helpful to the committee if we're not going through that ourselves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mary, if you could unmute and then introduce yourself, and please begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary. I'm a SNAP recipient from Minnesota. I'm here to share how critical SNAP is for my family, especially for my son, who has special dietary needs due to a medical condition. My son is on the growth hormone, which means he needs to eat more than the average child to stay healthy and support his development. Especially because he's a picky eater, there's times where he won't even eat the school lunches, so he will have to come home and make a late lunch. SNAP helps me afford the extra food he needs, nutritious, high-protein meals that aren't cheap. Without SNAP, I simply couldn't keep up with his dietary requirements. Because of the government shutdown, I've been told I may not receive November benefits. That caused anxiety for me, which impacts my mental health. I'm scared that without SNAP, I'll have to choose between buying my child unhealthy options because they are cheaper versus being able to supply nutritious options using SNAP. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a crisis. For many of us, SNAP is the only thing standing between stability and hunger. We are doing everything we can to care for our children. SNAP is what makes it even more possible. SNAP isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And any lapse in benefits, especially for families like mine, can cause serious consequences. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mary, I also want to thank you so much for coming and for sharing your story and really putting a human at the center. And I just, I have a 3-year-old, so we're in the peak of picky eater season. And I think a lot of times folks forget too that, you know, it's not just that kids need food to eat, they need the food that they will eat in order to eat. And so I am just so grateful to you for sharing your story and for coming to the committee today and giving us those details about life to help make it very human and not just a statistic.
Thank you very much. We will now turn to Carrie Thompson. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us again. If you could introduce yourself for the record and then provide your brief testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to represent the food shelves in Minnesota. My name is Carrie Thompson, and I'm the president and CEO of Veep. Veep is the largest food pantry in the state of Minnesota. We are located in Bloomington, Minnesota. However, we serve anyone from the state of Minnesota with our food programs, but the majority of the folks that we help live in Minneapolis, Bloomington, Richfield, and Edina. So the southern suburbs and the city of Minneapolis. Some of the other programs that we provide too is we have a housing stability program as well that helps folks with rent assistance and remaining stable in their homes through times of crisis like this. We've heard a lot of testimony today about some of the federal cuts that the food shelves are receiving across the board. Many of us rely on the Emergency Food Assistance Program. We at Veep have seen a 50% reduction in the food that is available to us through the Emergency Food Assistance Program this year, and we are anticipating that we'll probably see that same next year as well, that same cut and that same reduction. This comes at a time too when I said we do housing stability program as well. We're seeing cuts not only to food, but to all of the housing assistance programs as well. So in the past, Veep has always thought of food and housing needs as kind of going together, right? Like if somebody is food insecure, they're either gonna make the decision to try to pay rent or put food on the table. And so part of what we do is we work holistically with folks that come to us to help with either one or both of those, or one or either of those, or sometimes both of those. The majority of people that we see at Veep are working families, working 2, sometimes 3 jobs, trying to piece together an income to be able to survive. And so we see a lot of people that are at their most vulnerable. They hit a financial crisis, something medical like we heard from Rory or others, could just upset somebody's whole financial stability. And so those are the folks that we generally see on a regular basis, people who experience something that puts them into financial crisis, and then they need to come to us 5, 6, 7 times over the next few months to help. But generally they are able to get back on their feet. What we see now with the government shutdown is a huge surge of folks calling us immediately in panic right now. I can tell you, I was just on the phone with our marketing person this morning, and she told me that there's 3 times as many hits on our Find Food page on our website just this week alone. We had set up last night she had set up a page that said what to do during the government shutdown if you need food. And by this morning, there had already been 500 hits to that site as well, and it hadn't even been published to the community yet. So we're anticipating quite a big surge at the food pantries. I think we've heard from many people here about some of those cuts and some of the people who are in need, but the food shelves are already at capacity. There has been a 3-year surge in hunger in our state, and we are seeing at Veep alone about 140% increase in the amount of people that we serve in our food pantries over the last 3 years. And I think it's 150% statewide over all the food shelves. So we were already over capacity and underfunded when this year started. And now with the government shutdown, we are extremely concerned that we at the food shelves do not have the capacity to meet that need. Well, we are super appreciative of the $4 million that Governor Walz put into the budget for us to help with that. That isn't going to go very far. Just to give you an example, again, we're the largest food pantry in the state of Minnesota. We serve almost 300,000 individuals per year. The last $4 million that we received during that shutdown, or during the last amount that was given by Governor Walz, that equated to about $150,000 for us at VEEP. So that is about 2 months of our food budget right now, on top of the free food and TFAP that we receive as well. So very concerning right now for the food shelves, how we're gonna meet that capacity. Like I said, we're overtaxed as it is. We don't have the funding to purchase food. We don't have the staffing and the volunteers to be able to get that much food out the door. And we just don't even have the capacity or space within our building. Right now, we're serving about 215 households per day. And we're looking at increasing that, but we can only get so many people in and out of our building on any given day. There's not enough room in the parking lot. There's not enough space for people to walk through the building. So we're concerned about that. We're working with community partners to try to get emergency food packs out the door at locations throughout the city and making that barrier-free. But again, that requires transportation, people, corporate partners to be able to fund those e-packs and volunteers to be able to pack them. So it's concerning for all of us right now on the food shelf industry.
Thank you so much. It is frustrating to me to hear, a few weeks ago we talked about the permanent changes to SNAP and the cuts to food security that came in the beginning of the year to food shelves, specifically in food banks. And to know that this shutdown is just adding more people to the need that you guys are already just buried under. I just want to say thank you again for how much you have reached out to community, how much you all the food banks across the state have worked together to try to expand reach, to help people as they're, facing new uncertainty. Really grateful for your work in that space, but can't imagine how difficult this time is right now.
Thank you.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just totally disheartening. I'll just share with you what's happening in one of my communities. One of the food banks put out a call that the shelves were empty. We saw the empty shelves. Yep. And fortunately, there were many, I don't know if there were businesses, individuals who came in and restocked those shelves, brought those needed food items for their neighbors and friends. And so I am particularly concerned about the needless lack of food that is being shoved on, all across this nation, but I'm thinking about the folks here in Minnesota. And I'll just kind of finish up with my comments, Madam Chair, as I do have to leave early. But, it's just shocking as we hear all of these stories, not stories, just examples of really what's so important that our federal government is doing. Sometimes we kid that the federal government maybe isn't doing important things. We've heard today how important all of these services are, whether they're with heating, and we know how cold it's getting here, whether it has to do with food or WIC taking care of our youngest. These are absolutely critical, and I am reminded we cannot forget that, as has been done every other time, that continuing resolution should be passed, and particularly as it comes to things like heat, allowing Minnesotans to prepare. And I stand with the national president of the American Federal Government Employees Union. This is his statement, and I think we have heard this over and over today, why this is important. Here is his quote. "Today I am making my statement." He issued, this is his statement. "Today I'm making mine. It's time to pass a clean continuing resolution and end this shutdown today. No half measures, no gamesmanship, put every single federal worker back on the job with full pay today. There is no reason except for the lack of 5, in this case Democrat senators being bipartisan, to pass that continuing resolution." That is something that we should all demand at this table. There's nothing partisan about the harm that this shutdown is doing. Certainly there are issues that our federal friends out in DC are going to have to hash over. And they can hash over those issues. But as the national president of the American Federal Government Employees Union said, get the clean resolution passed, get people back to work, make sure our constituents are getting the services that they need, that taxpayers have paid for, and then do the negotiations on the things that are important to you. And I'm concerned that I've heard people right here say, well, this is leverage. We need leverage. I do not think for 1 minute that it is responsible for us to use the hardship of U.S. citizens, of Minnesotans, to gain political leverage. I think that is a horrendous thing. And as the House Minority Whip Catherine Clark said, I mean, shutdowns are terrible, and of course there will be, you know, families that are going to suffer. We actually heard from many today, needlessly, I must add. She continued on and said, we take that responsibility very seriously, but it is one of the few leverage times we have. I am sorry, not a single elected person should be using the harm to their constituents for political leverage. I reject that, and I'm disappointed that we're needing to see that in our country and here today. I am hoping that the 5 remaining five Democrat senators that it takes to at least get that continuing resolution passed will step up and do that job, including, that would include 2 of our own right here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Mayquade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just kind of want to say the blunt part out loud. And it's that people are going to die. If they don't have heating assistance, they will die. If they don't have WIC, they will die. If they don't have SNAP, they will die. If they don't have Medicaid, they will die. And if they don't have health insurance, they will die. So the choice before our federal partners is either fund the ACA subsidies, SNAP, WIC, heating assistance, reopen the federal government, or they could fund some of those things and leave 89,000 Minnesotans to either choose between health insurance or getting sick and acute care and blowing up the DHS budget. I don't know how this is a choice. I am so grateful that our senators are trying to save 89,000 Minnesotans from having their premiums double or more, because I don't want that to happen to them. I don't want people to die. All of these programs work in tandem. There is no way to pass a budget at the federal level that does some things and not others and then expect that people will be okay. I will say this and I will say it again. I have served in a trifecta. You don't need the minority party to do anything unless you need their votes for something, at which point you have to negotiate. Republicans in the House haven't been to work in weeks. In fact, we are a part-time legislature, and we have met more often than Republicans in the House have met recently. That is obscene. We have heard the harrowing stories from individuals, from organizations, from our union partners. The choice is so easy. fund ACA subsidies and extend them, save 89,000 Minnesotans from either losing their health insurance or losing their home because they had to buy health insurance, and help the 440,000 Minnesotans on SNAP and the 101,000 Minnesotans on WIC and the hundreds of thousands of people or tens of thousands of people who receive LIHEAP. That's an easy choice. And I wish it was an easy choice for our Republican colleagues and the federal government. And honestly, the one thing that could help that is in this room is our state Republican colleagues asking, make a tweet, make a call. Trump isn't even in the country, and if he is, he's golfing, but he listens to Republicans. And all the Republicans in Congress are waiting for him to tell them what to do, as they have over and over again. So it'd be great if we could get presidential leadership back in this country. It'd be great if we could get federal Republicans to just agree to not kill people with one of these programs going away, if we could have them all. If maybe we could, sell a private jet or two and fund these programs. Or maybe not bail out Argentina and fund these programs. It is dire, and people are crying out for help. And I need to say this, if we were sitting here and it was a president in my party, I would be saying the exact same thing. Nobody should die because a party doesn't want to help keep their health care. This committee is like the saddest thing we've ever done. And it doesn't have to be this way. Republicans have a trifecta. They could make the decision today to change their Senate rules and pass that clean CR. They have that power. Or they could negotiate with Democrats and get the ACA subsidies extended, and then they could pass the CR and we'd have that power. What is the problem? I don't want Minnesotans to die. I would do anything to prevent that. And we have a lot of work to do in this state, but there's only so much emergency funding we can move around. There's only so many times that volunteers can go in and restock a food shelf. There's only so many times that we can, band together to fill up a propane tank so our neighbors don't freeze to death. That only happens a little bit for a short amount of time. People can't go without paychecks. I mean, really ever, but for a very short amount of time before we're looking at a devastating crisis across the state. Republicans can stop that today, right now, and I really wish they would.
I'll go to you, Ms. Thompson, for any response to those, but I also want to invite Kenneth up to the table as our final testifier. You can come up and get ready too. Ms. Thompson.
First of all, my apologies for the coughing attack I had just a moment ago. I don't know where that came from. I just wanted to say, I hear the stories and I appreciate the stories, Senator Nelson, about your neighborhood banding together. And I think that's what we're seeing on the ground right now as well. Lots of people are stepping up and calling and wanting to donate and bringing food and to help out their neighbors, which is so appreciative, and we couldn't do it without them. But again, as I think we've all said here, it really is the government's responsibility to be helping out those who are without SNAP benefits right now, and not be putting that onto our neighbors. So we would really appreciate that any help that can be received to make that happen would be beneficial to our community.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson. We appreciate your testimony. Finally, Kenneth Garnier from AFSCME will join us to, Kenneth was someone who joined us last week at the Community Roundtable and was able to provide some insight into what our county workers are experiencing and what they're hearing from their clients. Kenneth, would you please introduce yourself and present your testimony?
Sure. My name is Kenneth Winslow Gagne. I work in local government at the county level. I help administer programs like SNAP, cash assistance, emergency assistance, shelter, healthcare, all those kind of social safety net programs. And, I'm born and raised here in Minneapolis. And my father was a minister for 30 years, so I grew up in the church. We're taught, that it is important to love your neighbor and to feed people that are hungry, heal people that are sick. And so my career at the county level, working in economic support, I get to do something that's really in alignment with my beliefs. And, just look out for my neighbors. And I try to look out for my colleagues as well at work, and that's why I do a lot of union work as well. But it's really troubling times. You know, there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there as far as the type of people that are requesting assistance. I work with families, and I can assure you that people are working. They're working multiple jobs. They're working Lyft. They're working at Walmart. People are working good jobs, some of them, and they just need help with their health insurance. And people are being squeezed from every angle. So housing expenses, you know, just paying your rent or paying your mortgage, that's a bill. Heating your house, you know, buying the groceries, putting gas in the car, paying for insurance, all these things add up. And so what we see is that people are working. You know, we have to fill out jobs panels and self-employment panels. So we know people are working because we have to enter that information into the system. We have to look at people's assets. So this isn't a matter of people just need to work more and do more. People are working and doing a lot. And it's unfair and it's untrue and it's wrong to demonize our neighbors in the way that some people are choosing to speak about people and misrepresent what's happening. And some of these people that are doing this are very wealthy. And they're pointing the finger at people that don't have the same amount of resources they have. And so, you know, I just want to talk a little bit about my neighbors. At my church, we do hot meals Monday through Friday, every day at 5:30. There is never food left over. All that food goes out into the community. We have a food shelf on Wednesdays and Thursdays. We don't have proteins to give to our neighbors. We just don't have the resources. And with everything happening with the federal government right now, it is really sad to talk to some of my elders, the people that are volunteering at my church, who don't have a lot of money, but are trying to reach in their pocket to go and buy some meat from the store to give to somebody in the community. It is wrong for people that are very wealthy to put that kind of stress and pressure on people that don't have much. And what I have seen is that people that don't have much are more likely to give than the people that have a lot. And so let's be truthful about what's happening. And when I talk about being truthful, I think it is the responsibility of our government and people who work for the government to tell the truth. When people call and they're asking for help at my job, they're relying on me to give clear information that they can understand, to say it in a way, to break it down for them, articulate it so that it's understood, and for the information that I'm giving them to be truthful. And that is very hard to do. And sometimes it's very hard to convince people of what the truth is, because there is so much mistruth coming from some people in our government. People are using AI and making videos and just misrepresenting what's happening. And people are hearing things on social media, and sometimes they're hearing it, you know, from friends and family, and they believe these things to be true, and they're not. So when they're calling us, it's really our responsibility to make sure that we're being truthful and that we're giving accurate information. And that is hard to do because we're not getting very good information from the federal government. And so the state's trying to bridge the gap there because we're not getting good instructions. So the state's trying to give us instructions. We're trying to create workarounds at our job to meet people's needs, or to, you know, every program, it can only do what it was programmed to do. So when things change suddenly, they may not be able to make those changes in the program. We have to figure out a way to still get an outcome, even though the system isn't built to do whatever it is that we're asking them to do. And so when you look at the amount of strain that's going on to people who are working in this job, first of all, our job is already hard because we're dealing with people that are in crisis. We have to de-escalate these people and get to the facts of what's going on in their situation, and then determine how we can help them, determine their eligibility for these programs. So that's a task within itself that requires a lot of emotional labor. But when there's so much uncertainty and so much misinformation, it just compounds all of these things. And when people are calling, they may be calling just about food support, but they have other concerns. And so when a person's calling and they need help with, as people have talked about, their housing, their heating, their, things that we can't even help them. We can't help people with their insurance, their car insurance or other things. We can help them with their health care. But, we have limits to what we can do. So people are never just calling about one thing. They're calling about multiple things. And then we're just trying to do our best to give accurate and truthful information. And, we're hopeful that the government will reopen and that they'll, approve the funding that is needed. But people that work where I work are also concerned of, are they going to get laid off? Do they have a career here? Are we going to be able to continue to provide services for our neighbors, for the people that live in this community? So I'm just saying all these things to kind of I know people provided a lot of data and stats throughout the day, but I just want to put a little bit of a human face on what this is and what it means to people and what it means to folks that, may not have a lot but are willing to share. We're at a point where there's less and less for us to be able to share. You can't raise everyone's rent and raise everyone's health insurance and raise the price of groceries and do all of these things all at the same time and expect to have a good result. And that's kind of what we're experiencing. And, if people don't get their food support benefits in the month of November and they're not able to buy groceries, what happens to the grocery store worker? Do they get less shifts? What happens to the people that drive the groceries, from one state to the grocery store or, from wherever groceries come? Like, somebody has to transport the stuff, right? Like, I just see all these cascading effects that will happen. And so it's like, oh, well, who cares about, these few people that are going to starve? It's like, no, this will have, first of all, I care about those people that will starve. But this will have all kinds of impacts on more and more people. And the longer it goes on, the more people will be impacted. And this isn't a positive impact. This is a negative impact. So I'm prayerful that, as a union guy, we believe in negotiating in good faith. So it's really strange. It's bizarre behavior for people not to get together and negotiate, not to put time aside, to get together. And so just not meeting, not doing your job as a congressperson, that seems very strange to me. And you can't say you're negotiating in good faith if you're not even meeting. So I hope that our leaders will get together and that they'll come to some consensus and that people will have less uncertainty in their life. Because what I see from people is people that are just very stressed all the time, every day, and that cannot be healthy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garnier. One question for you. When we spoke last week at the roundtable, we talked a little bit about, the emotions that are coming through from people who are calling in, the level of concern that they have, and the amount of stress that also puts on you and your coworkers as you're dealing with people who are going through fear and unknown. As we get closer to this November 1st date, have those calls changed? What are you hearing from people? Like, what is the level of fear, I guess?
Well, people are having a hard time getting through the phone lines. There was already a need there before the government shut down, but when there is so much uncertainty, people have more concerns, and people are seeking answers, and so more people are calling. So the government being shut down, I think, is very expensive, and I think it's causing more havoc, more chaos, more uncertainty, and it's causing, because people don't know what to anticipate, we're just getting barraged by people, and people are coming into the office. More people are coming into the office. So like any way that they can get a hold of us, they're trying to get their questions answered and their needs met. So I would say that, the longer this thing goes on, the more desperate people will get. And in this state, I think people will start getting their benefits on the 4th of the month, depending on the last number of their case number. Usually like the 4th to the 13th, people are getting their benefits. So, I just, and because groceries and everything is so expensive now, people have less of an ability to budget, right? So like you might be able to keep a little bit of something in reserve, but because prices are raising so much, people just can't plan. It's very hard. It's very difficult for people.
Thank you so much. Senator Coran. Closing comments. Yep, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Garnier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've heard a bunch of issues that are absolutely relevant to people with the greatest needs in Minnesota. We've heard a bunch about bipartisanship or the necessity for it. In this particular case, I think it's really clear. It's simple, pass the continuing resolution. We need to get our federal government back open in every way, shape, and form. But it doesn't require, and I think I've heard the urging of the trifecta at the federal level, doesn't grant them ultimate power in a narrow majority. It grants them power. And I've heard the encouragement to, just change the rules. Changing the rules moves out into simple pure democracy of simple majority, which doesn't grant that power. And I think our colleagues on the other side, I would love to change those rules at the federal level, just as they've done here in the state. Removing the filibuster would be the destruction, a further destruction. I think we can all point to the greatest challenges serving as a state legislator is terrible federal law, which we're bound to. We can find common ground all across the spectrum, no matter what the program is. But to change those rules are in there for a reason. We can't have anybody functioning on a simple majority as if the rules don't matter and pass anything, just like we did here in Minnesota through proxy voting, 23 through 25 in the Senate without any need. It has a drastic impact. The shutdown has a drastic impact as well. But that continuing resolution could be voted on, 5 Democrat senators. I think we could maybe unite and tell our governor to remove or retract his statement that, hey, they should hold out as long as possible. They can't lose on this. Those are his words. He doesn't appear to be interested in trying to get this resolved. There are other issues where there's disagreement and they have to find bipartisan support. Those issues are separate. In this case, of the short-term and temporary, right, the temporary impact, we've got billions of dollars of identified fraud. Who knows what they'll be able to prosecute here? We could take care of some of those needs. What the federal level is looking at is the preservation of the 2 issues they want to add back in, and the one is the enhanced premium subsidy that was greatly increased through COVID, but it was determined to be expired by Biden-led administration. It expired as they wanted it to. Those subsidies further hid the damage and the destruction, especially to Minnesota. We had one of the best healthcare systems in the country. We had all those benefits of everything that was supposedly being achieved by ACA. Every facet has made it unaffordable, and the subsidies continue to exacerbate that problem. And it was by design. There's an insurance, like a poison pill. Let's have it terminate, and then if we lose, then we'll have to put the burden onto somebody else. And what that battle is the battle is affordable health care, in addition to the changes of the expansion or the extension of the subsidy, health care for illegal citizens on the backs of hardworking legal U.S. citizens. And so with that, what we're talking about is it could be done pretty simply, and I sure hope it did. I sure hope it gets done. Those deadlines are necessary to cause action and consequences. I hope we're not harmed. I think we would have had in dollars here if we wouldn't have had such waste. But what we're missing in this whole conversation is the impacts. When we talk about cost of living, we heard everything. The last testifier just talked about the cost of rents, the cost of living and working in the state of Minnesota, the burdens that have been passed along since the legislation 23 through 25 greatly exacerbate the changes that are permanent or long-term as the new administration has, and or these temporary changes. They're far in excess, the greatest contributor in the cost of living in Minnesota. These issues all were exacerbated far beyond, long before the shutdown and the cuts to some of these critical needy programs. And so we're not talking about fixing any of those. We're not talking about the shift of burden onto direct property taxes, which are very significant for every person on a fixed income. The very same people we're talking about here. We didn't have a single conversation about that. All of our local taxes, our government expansion, in addition to our schools, every one of them is going to come out for a new bonding operating levy because they've been crushed by receiving more dollars and having fewer dollars and greater budget challenges. And so, Madam Chair, if we're going to move this committee forward, it would be wonderful if we were going to look at it holistically. What are the real short-term impacts? We can hope they go away and with the vote, and it can, and hopefully it will. But at the end of the day, are we interested in dealing with the true costs? When they pass it, it will take care of the very needy and the most critical for food. But it doesn't fix any of those other things that have made it unaffordable to raise a family and live in Minnesota at all. And so I would love to do that. I would also like to see this committee actually function as a committee with notice, 72-hour notice, so those that don't receive the pre-planned scripts have an opportunity to reach out. And I think there's some change that we've gotten a little bit better on notice. But I think there's other people that would like to participate and that aren't invited into the program. And it's sold to the public that this is a traditional committee meeting. It's not, because we haven't received notice, very little notice for members, more or less the public, on how they could participate if they weren't already part of the pre-negotiated plan. So we'd love to see that notification, 72 hours for everybody. And with that, let's work on the whole plan, and let's hope that all of our legislators, our congressional delegation and their senators pass the continuing resolution so they can continue to do the hard work that they have. Thank you.
Members, testifiers, we heard really sobering testimony today. And I'm pretty upset about it. It is really hard to sit here and listen to the struggles that Minnesotans are facing that are increasingly being piled on top of each other. And that every single thing that is increasing these struggles, the cost of food, food security, SNAP, WIC, rental assistance, are you getting a paycheck? All of these pieces, the cost of energy, the cost of propane, are you able to pay for it? Is the program that's supposed to help you, if you can't, even running? They are choices. These are choices that our federal government is making supposedly on our behalf. And to have, when we started this committee on the very first day of the shutdown was our first hearing here. We've been 30 days now. I was floored by the federal government's deliberate actions to change SNAP and Medicaid work requirements and all of these programs that we have used. We have partnered as a society to say these things are important to us. It is important that people can eat, can live, can, work with dignity. And those are being crippled piece by piece by the Trump administration. And now they're using a government shutdown to just increase the pace of the pain. And we know Republicans can change the rules to pass a bill if they want to, because they did it for the One Big Beautiful bill. And we know that you have to work with the people that you want to pass a bill with if you need their votes. So that's an option. And I cannot sit here and understand why my colleagues here in Minnesota, my Republican colleagues, who I know support the ACA, the expanded tax credits, because they sat here and said it 2 weeks ago, who I know support SNAP in their communities, who I know, believe these things are good ideas. I don't understand why they're carrying water for this. We are not in charge of the federal government's choices, but the federal government is supposed to represent us. And Minnesotans, over and over and over, have supported these programs, have needed these programs. So it is baffling to me that Minnesotan Republicans are choosing to back this administration and the desire to just continue to break things. And I will say, we talked a lot about SNAP and food security today, and we talked about LIHEAP, but they're not the only disruptions. There are disruptions to the Essential Air Service program, straining our local airports, particularly those in Greater Minnesota. There are multiple Head Start centers in Greater Minnesota that are under threat of closing, a chunk this month and another chunk next month if we don't expand through this. The CDC is not informing of our state and local health agencies about emerging issues, including on COVID, the flu, or other diseases. And while this is happening, it's not just like the federal government is doing nothing. We heard from the folks who are on the ground, and federal workers are still doing jobs. They're just not getting paid for it. Federal workers are trying to figure out how to help their colleagues, but they're not getting paid for it. Well, our federal government is making choices, spending that money right now. $40 billion bailout for Argentina and a quadrupling of Argentinian beef purchases, which will hurt our farmers and ranchers more. Demanding a $230 million payment to himself from the Department of Justice, Donald Trump. $200 million in private jets plural, for Kristi Noem. A $500,000 signing bonus for each new ICE agent that alone would be enough to keep 23 Minnesotans on SNAP for a year, just that $150,000 for one person. The difference between this shutdown and the ones that we lived through before is this president is in the pocket of billionaires and a Republican Congress that refuses to rein in his campaign of corruption. He was elected on America First, but the reality is that we're living with a federal government that doesn't even pretend to care about Americans. And I will just add that today, about an hour ago, House Leader Mike Johnson said Republicans will not fund SNAP. This is a quote. Republicans won't fund SNAP because it would reduce pressure on Democrats. People are hungry. People need to eat food. That is the bottom line. People need to have health insurance that is not 4 times the cost that it was last year. Losing a good federal partner highlights how connected the federal government is to every single part of our state. Being here in this room, learning that from people who testified before us today is critical for us to understand the damage this administration and a Republican-controlled Congress are choosing to wreak on our society. And when the federal government vanishes, this state has to pick up the slack. We at this table and at the legislature have a duty to the people who elected us to find out where the federal government is causing the most damage and do our best to patch the wounds so Minnesotans can live in security. I guess our Republican colleagues don't understand what we've been doing these last several weeks, but we're going to continue going out into community, hearing community stories, and then bringing those stories back to the Capitol, because it is critical that we understand what Minnesotans are feeling. Next week, we will be up in Duluth talking about higher education, research grants, medical research grants that have been canceled, postponed, and the impact that that's having on our scientific research at our universities. The following week, we will be back here for a hearing. There's also a supplemental option trip coming in mid-November for members to go to a county and literally watch these very broken computer systems that they are trying to work with to administer these programs. All of those options, opportunities are on your calendars, members, as well as on the committee gold page, the committee website, so folks should be able to access it there as it has been up through the running of this committee. And with that, we are adjourned.